Everything is too easy after maxing my talents. Chapter 801, Anlina, the Emperor's Sun Star. 1. After lunch at the military council cafeteria, Andrea, who had helped them buy temporary residence permits, returned. This temporary residence permit was only valid for 3 months. After 3 months, those students who did not enter the academy or join any official organization would lose the right to stay on the Imperial Sun Star. If they couldn't pay enough, the Starfield's Immigration Management Department would expel them back to their respective planets. In other words, the students had to showcase themselves in the next 3 months and do their best to prove their worth to the Imperial Sun and the military committee. Otherwise, once they were eliminated from the first echelon of the prodigy nurturing flow, they would be eliminated. It would be difficult to climb up again. After counting all the students in charge and distributing all the temporary residence permits, Andrika clapped his hands and said, "The temporary residence permit is valid for 3 months. You should know this better than me. So, you can contact the elders of your respective planets to take you to the major schools to register. If there are any problems at the official level, you can try to contact me, but I can't guarantee that I can help you solve them. Lastly, try not to cause any trouble on the Imperial Sun planet. Once you break the law, even your identity as a genius cannot guarantee that you will be able to stay on this planet." After announcing all the information, Andrika looked at all the students and paused for a moment before continuing, "Good luck, boys. I look forward to seeing you on the battlefield in the future." Andrika turned around and led the students to the entrance of the military committee. This was the procedure that all the students who passed the special referee assessment had to go through. First, they entered the military committee's base on the Sun Empire. After they passed the identity verification, they would apply for a temporary residence permit. After applying for temporary residence permits, the students could be led by the person in charge of the various planets to receive the geniuses of their respective planets to enter the Imperial Sun planet for free activities. 7 to 20,003. The person in charge of planet No. 10 had already received Evelyn's message. At this moment, he was gathered at the exit of the military committee's Imperial Sun base with the other person in charge of other planets, silently waiting for Li Yueming and the others to arrive. Andrei brought a group of students from the Witch Star system to the gate and informed his colleagues before leaving. Along with them were many students who had just finished their meals and obtained their temporary residence permits. Amidst the crowd, Li Yueming dialed the communicator of the person in charge of Planet 7 to 20,003. The communicator was quickly connected, and a cold female voice sounded, "You guys come out from aisle 3. I'll wait for you at the smoking area at the door." After hearing the other party's voice, Li Yueming and the others calmed down and walked in the direction of passage No. 3. In the chaotic crowd, Li Yueming bumped into So Coco and the others. The few of them exchanged a few simple greetings and agreed to contact each other after settling down. Then, they went their separate ways to look for their own guides. After walking for about 5 minutes, the crowd finally cleared up. In the corner of the smoking room, the 3 of them saw the person in charge of Planet 7 200,003. The other party was a long and beautiful woman with long hair. She was wearing a capable agent uniform and was smoking a slim lady's cigarette alone. Sensing their gazes, the woman turned to look at them. After sizing them up, she revealed a charming smile and said, "I don't know how long it's been since I've come into contact with young people. After seeing you guys, I really feel like I've aged." As she spoke, she shook her fingers and stubbed out the cigarette butt before exhaling a mouthful of smoke. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Davies Onlina, and I'm from Planet 7 to 20,003 like you. I'm currently the leader of the high-level special agent team in the Military Council's main office on Imperial Sun. I shouldn't be in charge of welcoming newcomers. The reason I'm here is because Evelyn called me and repeatedly told me to be in charge. It has been more than 30 years since Evelyn last recommended a young man to the Imperial Sun Star, but she made an exception this time. Not only did she call me to tell me, but she also reminded me that there is a genius among the kids that I sent over that is worth nurturing. At this point, Lina's gaze slowly swept across the three of them before finally landing on Li Yueming. She licked her red lips and said, "If I'm not wrong, the person she was talking about should be you, right?" Small planets were called small planets. Other than the lack of resources and the fact that they were located in a remote area, the biggest pain was actually that they did not have a strong enough expert. The lack of resources meant that they could not nurture outstanding young people. If they could not nurture outstanding young people, they would not be able to produce powerful and influential experts to free the planet from its geographical predicament. And if they couldn't get rid of the geographical predicament, it would cause the planet to lack resources even more. It had always been a vicious development. For example, Lina was the leader of the high-level special agent team in the Military Affairs Committee's main office on planet Imperial Sunday. According to the current rank of the Military Affairs Committee, she should be a Major General. However, Lina was already considered one of the best geniuses on Planet 7 to 20,003. However, because he did not have a strong background, even if he was promoted to Major General, his authority was limited. Chapter 802, Lina, the Emperor's Sun Star. 2. Compared to the major generals who were born on large and medium-sized planets, she could only mobilize a small portion of the resources that belonged to the major generals. Under such circumstances, if the small planets wanted to develop, they had to unite. Apart from working hard to climb up, the most important thing was to change the vicious competition of the planets they belonged to. The most effective way to get out of this awkward situation was naturally to use all the resources to nurture the most talented young man and send him to a higher position as much as possible. This way, everyone would be able to get better and better, and climb higher and higher. In fact, almost every small planet did this, but very few could successfully escape from their own situation. Whether it was Planet 7 to 20,003 itself or the young people from Planet 7 to 20,003, they had been working hard for a long time. The closest he had come to success so far was more than 300 years ago. At that time, that genius had already attracted the attention of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. Originally, as long as he grew up, there was hope to improve the plight of Planet 7-20003. However, in the end, it was only because of a small negligence on his part that he revealed his whereabouts when he was fighting the Zergs at the front line, causing him to be targeted and killed by the hunter team. Now, he had invited her over to be his guide. It was obvious that Evelyn really valued Li Yueming. Li Yueming, on the other hand, replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "If you're referring to the special recommendation quota, Lady Evelyn did give it to me." Li Yueming admitted. Lina's beautiful eyes erupted with a powerful force as she looked down at Li Yueming. "Oh, kid, you seem to be very confident. Do you know what this place is?" Although her attention was not on Lu Dali and Fan Li yet. However, he was only being watched by her from the corner of her eye. Lu Dali and Fan Li also felt a huge pressure. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on him, and his entire body felt heavy. At the same time, there was an indescribable fear lingering in his heart. And this was just a trace of pressure that leaked out from the corner of his eyes. If Lina were to look at any of them right now, they would probably have already turned pale with fright. This was the natural sense of oppression from a high-level martial artist to a low-level martial artist. There was no need for any action at all. Just a glance was enough to press a low-level martial artist who was not firm enough to move to the ground. However, Li Yueming's voice remained calm as he replied indifferently, "I don't need to know where this place is. I just need to know what I need to do, right?" He was not affected much. Lina was clearly a little surprised, and she only retracted her gaze after a moment. "Very good, it seems like Evelyn didn't lie to me. There is indeed a very interesting little fellow here. Come with me, I've already arranged accommodation for you. It's only about 10 minutes away from the many martial arts schools on the Imperial Sun planet." Seeing that Enlina had retracted her martial arts aura, he led the way with a cigarette in his hand. Fan Li quickened his pace and approached Li Yueming. He exclaimed, F***ck, I've heard about Miss Enlina in school. She graduated 15 years ago with a special recommendation, and she was already a level 6 martial artist 8 years ago. She might have already broken through or approached the threshold of a level 7 martial artist by now. You can actually remain calm under the pressure of her martial aura. At this point, Fan Li was speechless, as if he was racking his brains to find a more suitable adjective. After a long while, he continued, I have to say, you're really a monster. Lu Dali silently followed behind him without saying anything. However, he looked at Li Yueming with confusion. From the outside, Li Yueming did not look like a proud son of heaven, but the more they interacted, the more they could feel his unfathomable talent and strength. When he first met Li Yueming, Lu Dali thought that Li Yueming's actual combat strength would be inferior to his. After all, he had grown up through actual combat since he was young. Whether it was height, weight, or physical strength, he should have an advantage. Even when he was beaten up by Li Yueming for Evelyn's recommendation before he boarded the spaceship, Lu Dali was still not completely convinced. But now, he realized how wrong he was. If Li Yueming really wanted to deal with him, why would he need 2 hands? The two sides were on completely different levels in terms of combat experience and actual combat strength. If they fought, it would probably be a one-sided suppression. However, it was also after discovering this fact that Lu Dali found it increasingly difficult to understand. They were clearly people with one head on each shoulder. Why was there such a huge gap? He believed that he had worked hard enough. He had achieved the best results in all kinds of physical training and actual combat training at his age. It was fine if they could not compare to the geniuses of those large planets. After all, there was a fundamental gap between the two sides. Li Yueming's family background was similar to his, and his growth path was not as magnificent as his, but his actual combat ability was enough to hang him and beat him up. This made him doubt that life was hard to accept. So this was a genius? Looking at Li Yueming's back, Lu Dali felt discouraged and clenched his fists. Although he might not be able to catch up even if he tried, if he did not even have the courage to work hard, then why did he come to the Imperial Sun planet? Thinking of this, Lu Dali quickly followed and said in a low voice, You are indeed very strong, but I will definitely catch up to you. Li Yueming didn't have any reaction. Only Fan Li secretly rolled his eyes. Lu Dali was tall and strong, but he didn't expect his brain to be so bad. How hard was it to chase after a perverted genius with a mortal body for no reason? Only after being beaten up by reality would one know that there was really a barrier between ordinary people and geniuses that could not be crossed. Only a truly smart person like him would act according to his ability and not go against him. The 3 of them followed behind Enlin, but each of them had their own thoughts. After leaving the headquarters of the military committee, they looked at the prosperous and lively planet in front of them. They were awakened from their dreams and could not help but widen their eyes. It turned out that they hadn't landed on the surface yet. They were in the dissipation layer where the interstellar dock was located. They looked down at the glass cover of the closed loop of the interstellar space capsule, and a magnificent and huge fiery red planet appeared in their retinas. This planet was so huge. In front of it, planet 7 to 20,003, where the 3 of them used to live, was as small as a grain of sand. This planet was so prosperous. Below the space station, a super-floating fortress made of steel machinery was taking off. The endless steel walls in the sky were the main melody of this planet. Complicated, exquisite, and magnificent. These were the feelings that surfaced in their minds when they saw the Imperial Sun star, which was known as the Eternal Sun by the surrounding star fields. Even Li Yueming, who had always thought that he was knowledgeable, could not help but narrow his eyes when he saw this planet. His heart was even more shocked. Enlina lit another lady's cigarette for herself. After waiting outside the space station for a while, she couldn't help but tease, so, this is the central planet of the Imperial Sun Star area. Is the stage big enough? Hearing this, Li Yueming could still maintain his rationality. However, Fan Li and Lu Dali nodded in unison. How could this stage not be big enough? It was simply too big. It even made them feel an impulse to be ashamed. After all, natives of small planets like them were as humble as ants in front of the huge elephants of the Imperial Sun Star. How could ants show off their might in front of elephants? Chapter 803, Hard Titanium Alloy, Ultimate Martial Arts School. 1. Looking at the vast planet under their feet, the three of them, including Li Yueming, were all amazed. The Imperial Sun Star was the economic, political, and cultural center of the entire Imperial Sun Star field. In the entire Third Universe, it could be considered one of the most technologically advanced planets. The interstellar spacecraft that circled the planet was already a beautiful sight. On the giant red planet, the metal track carried the vehicle at high speed, drawing long tails through the clouds. For people like them who were born on a small planet, this was definitely a dream scene that they could never imagine in their entire lives. The reason why they could enjoy it now was, to a certain extent, thanks to the invasion of the Zerg. Otherwise, no matter how talented the three of them were, they would not have been able to cross the sea of stars to come here. Standing on the platform at the dock's exit, Anlina remained silent for a moment before she finished a cigarette and said, "Are you surprised? When I first came here, I was even more surprised than you. What you see now is only 1/10 of the true appearance of the Imperial Sun Star. The real shocking scene is still to come." Anlina tossed the cigarette into the trash can before continuing, "Are you done? Come with me after you're done." The three of them finally woke up. What they had just seen was already shocking enough, but they didn't expect Anlina to say that this was only 1/10 of the entire Imperial Sun planet. How majestic was the real Imperial Sun Star? The three of them tried to imagine it, but in the end, their imagination was limited. They could only smack their lips a few times with lingering fear and nod. "I'm done. I'll be right there." Seeing that the three of them were finally willing to look away, Anlin flicked her wrist a few times, and a few seconds later, a small floating spaceship appeared in front of them. Anlina pointed at the small spaceship. "This is the H-7 small civilian spaceship produced by the Hank Military Mining Group. I spent quite a bit of universe dollars to buy it. How about it? Isn't it cool?" Looking at this small and exquisite spaceship that was full of technology and metal texture, although the facilities were not as advanced as those large military spaceships, Hank Military had done a lot of work on the design and materials. Therefore, the flying ship's design was very domineering. Its entire body was filled with smooth and beautiful lines. The three of them nodded sincerely. A smug smile appeared on Anlina's face, and she was obviously pleased with their reaction. She opened the hatch and said, "Come in, I'll take you to the Interstellar Hotel to put your luggage." This was not the first time the three of them had taken a spaceship. However, the military spaceships had restrictions. They could only stay in the cabin and could not enter the other areas that were not open to them. They could not enter the interior of the spaceship and look around. The spaceship looked very small from the outside. However, after entering the interior, he realized that it was much larger than he had imagined, and the decorations were also much more luxurious than he had imagined. The only difference was that the color was a little pink, and it was likely that Anlina had made some modifications to the interior. After setting the destination, the spaceship sailed steadily. Fan Li sat on the pink seat of the flying ship, his eyes shining. He said with a slightly perturbed expression, "Miss Anlina, how much is this spaceship? I also want to own my own spaceship. Tell me the price and let me give up." Hearing this, Anlina crossed her arms and smiled. "Haha, it's only 1 billion universe credits. It's not too much, haha." Even though he was mentally prepared, Fan Li still couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when he heard the number of 1 billion. Good heavens, is the outer shell of this spaceship made of gold or is the interior made of gold? How can it be sold at such a high price? 1 billion universe credits was almost equivalent to half a year's production capacity of some small corporations on Planet 7 to 20,003, yet they could only afford a small spaceship like this? Sensing the confusion in his eyes, Anlina retracted her smile and explained, actually, this kind of small civilian interstellar spaceship can only be bought for 3 to 500 million yuan at most. But wasn't the war on the front line tense these years? In addition, the resources in the Imperial Sun starfield are also very scarce. The price of a spaceship that requires some hard titanium alloy will naturally rise. Even if I bid 1 billion, I would have to queue for more than half a year to buy it. Hearing her explanation, the doubts in their hearts were immediately resolved. The so-called hard titanium alloy was a super precious metal that only existed in the core of abandoned planets. Whether it was building spaceships or developing various high-performance weapons and equipment, it could not be separated from it. From all angles, this could be considered a currency that was even harder than the universe credits issued by the Alliance of Law. Originally, the universe did not lack hard titanium alloy. However, ever since the Zerg invasion a few eras ago, the hard titanium alloy in the entire universe had been consumed at a rapid rate. After the establishment of the Alliance of Order, the various universes tried to find a lot of substitutes for hard titanium alloy, but they still could not change the tense situation of hard titanium alloy in short supply. Now, the hard titanium alloy in the 7 universes of the Alliance of Order was basically firmly controlled by the military committee. The hard titanium alloy produced every year was basically all made into various high-precision weapons and shipped to the front-line battlefield. Chapter 804, Hard Titanium Alloy, Ultimate Martial Arts School. 2. Privately, they could only mine on planets with very low production and storage. Building a spaceship, even a civilian spaceship, required some hard titanium alloy. This was also the biggest reason why the price of spaceships had doubled. The speed of the ship was very fast. In about 10 minutes, they landed in the residential area near the surface. Li Yueming and the others also realized that the human towns on the Imperial Sun Star were not built on the surface, but were built 1,000 meters above the ground, where the environment was not as harsh. On the surface even further away, Li Yueming and the others could actually see a green color that was very pleasing to the music. Anlina could be considered a responsible tour guide, and upon seeing the surprised expressions on their faces, she couldn't help but explain, the surface of the Imperial Sun Star is a primitive forest without any pollution. You didn't expect this, did you? They all shook their heads. When they looked down from the space dock, they did not see any greenery on the planet. They could only see endless steel barriers. And now, after passing through the steel space on the surface of the Imperial Sun Star was actually a primitive forest that had not been polluted at all. No wonder Anlina said that they had only seen 1/10 of Emperor Sun Star field. Anlina knew what they were thinking, and she continued, when technology evolves to a certain extent, humans and nature can coexist peacefully, right? Fan Li and Lu Dali's eyes were filled with clear stupidity. Only Li Yueming remained calm. Anlina leaned against the glass window and stared at Li Yueming with interest. You have a different opinion. Li Yueming nodded and then shook his head. It's just that the people on the Imperial Sun Star can coexist peacefully with nature. What do you mean? There are so many technological facilities on the Imperial Sun Star, it can't be that they appeared out of thin air, right? Since the people on planet Diang were living in harmony with nature, there must be other places where people and nature could not live in harmony. Anlina was stunned for a moment before she smiled. You're right. The so-called peaceful coexistence between man and nature is just a lie. Anlina seemed to be in a daze, and after a long while, she said with a self-deprecating expression, I really don't know how we can see the light of victory in this war. At this point, the atmosphere in the entire spaceship became a little heavy. The war between the Zergs and the Alliance of Order was like a distant dream. Although this dream seemed out of reach, it had unknowingly touched every aspect of their lives. The group ended their short journey in silence. After Lin's spaceship docked at the dock in the residential area, they finally officially set foot on the Imperial Sun planet. There were all kinds of cosmic humans from countless star fields on the Emperor Yang star. There were yellow, black, green, and even blue skin. 6 ears and 8 nostrils weren't anything surprising. Although they were all collectively referred to as humans, some of the human-shaped creatures that were born in the harsh conditions of the starfields were really difficult to describe in a few words. Lina had arranged for Li Yueming and the others to stay in a hotel called Mr. Universe. According to Lina, the owner of this restaurant was also a fellow villager from Planet 7 to 20,003 who had come here to seek development, so she could naturally save some unnecessary accommodation expenses. After all, she still owed a spaceship loan, and her financial situation was not particularly good. Naturally, she would save as much as she could. After leading the group into the room, Lina finally put away her indifferent expression and said in a serious tone, although theoretically, you can go for the assessment after touring the Imperial Sun Star for a period of time, if you don't want to be eliminated by other students before taking the assessment, it's better for you to quickly find a school that matches your ability. I'm the team leader of the special agent team. I'm very busy with work on weekdays. In order to receive you, I've already asked my superior for a week's leave. Although my superior has agreed, I don't want to ask for leave from my superior again after a week. Therefore, I hope that you can settle the matter of applying for school within a week. Later on, when I have time, I can bring you to visit the surface park and underground entertainment city of the Imperial Sun planet. Lina paused for a moment. He looked at the 3 people present and asked, do you have any other opinions on this arrangement? Although she was asking a question, her tone clearly did not leave any room for the 3 students to refuse. Fortunately, the 3 of them did not have any other opinions. Only Fan Li said somewhat unconfidently, Miss Lina, what if I don't get into the martial arts school within a week? Hearing this, Lina's delicate nose wrinkled as she swept her gaze over Fan Li with an unfriendly expression. After a long while, she said helplessly, I will arrange for others to bring you to continue trying. However, if you still can't get into the academy in the first few weeks, you'd better think of a way out as soon as possible. There were many martial arts schools on the Imperial Sun planet, but the number of outstanding students who came to the Imperial Sun planet to participate in the assessment was even greater. Most martial arts schools had almost filled up their student quota in the first few weeks. The students who came to apply later might have already been snatched up by the outstanding students in front of them before the examination had even started. Under such circumstances, if one wanted to get in again, the only way was to display a talent that was truly stunning, such that the school would be willing to squeeze out a spot for someone else. Fan Li was a little uneasy, but he knew that this was the limit of Lin's abilities, so he hurriedly nodded. Thank you, Miss Lina. I'll do my best. Lina nodded before turning to Li Yueming. Have you thought about applying for the school? In the end, the biggest reason why she came here personally was to receive Li Yueming. Although Fan Li and Lu Dali were also geniuses, they didn't have the face to make her make such a big fuss. It was just a bonus on the way. Fan Li and Lu Dali obviously knew about this as well, so they didn't say anything. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Li Yueming scratched his head and said, of course I want to apply for the ultimate martial arts school on the Imperial Sun planet. Is there any other school for me to choose from? Li Yueming didn't think there was anything wrong with what he said. After all, he really wanted to know if there was still a chance to join other advanced martial arts schools. However, Lina, Fan Li, and Lu Dali couldn't help but twitch their lips. What did he mean by of course I'll apply for the ultimate martial arts school on the Imperial Sun planet? Could it be that the Imperial Sun Star's ultimate martial arts school was that easy to get into? Fan Li and Lu Dali were still fine. After all, the three of them had already gotten to know each other well on the road. They had long known that Li Yueming had extraordinary potential. Now, they were only amazed by Li Yueming's bravery. However, Lina was different. She had only met Li Yueming once, so her emotions were clearly more complicated than before. After a long silence, she took a deep breath and said, "Are you serious?" Under normal circumstances, there was only one chance to apply for the Imperial Sun Star's Ultimate Martial School. If you tried now, you would not have the chance to apply again in the future. The number of students in the Imperial Sun Star's Ultimate Martial School was not fixed. It was said that there was a very strict elimination system. Even if they passed the assessment and entered the school, those students who did not have enough credits at the end of the year would even be expelled from the school. It was also because of this that some students who were not so confident in their own strength would specially wait for the first round of the assessment to end before signing up to participate. This was also widely acknowledged as the easiest way to get into the Ultimate Martial Arts School. 100 to 30% of the students were admitted to the Ultimate Martial Arts School through this method. The reason why Lina reminded Li Yueming not to sign up so quickly was obviously because she wanted Li Yueming to take this route more safely. Chapter 805, Ultimate Martial Arts Academy, Assessment 1. There was no need to say how intense the competition in the Ultimate Martial Arts School of the Imperial Sun Star was. The geniuses of the small planets could only be used as a foil in the assessment. The students who were really ranked first on the admission list were all young geniuses from the big planets around the Imperial Sun Star field. Even the youngsters from the medium-sized planets would basically take the safer route of the second batch of students. Otherwise, it would be asking for trouble to compete with the students from the big planets. Although everyone had learned the third cultivation plan for personal mighty power warriors, they had received individual tutelage from level 8 and level 10 martial artists since they were young. They had also received all kinds of precious martial arts resources. How could their strength be easily matched by the geniuses of a small planet who had to save on their nutrient fluids? Therefore, even though Evelyn had already mentioned in her letter that Li Yueming was extremely talented, Lin still believed that no matter how talented Li Yueming was, there was no way a genius from a small planet could compete with a genius from a large planet. This was not a difference in people, but a difference in their foundations. 7 to 20,003 The young geniuses from planet No. 10 could enter the Ultimate Martial Arts School in the second batch of assessments. They could already be considered peerless geniuses that were hard to come by in hundreds of years. Lina sorted out her thoughts and advised, "From my point of view, it's best for you to go to another academy to take the assessment. With your talent, it shouldn't be a problem for you to get into a first-rate martial arts school on planet Dying. After you're accepted by the other first-rate martial arts schools, you should wait for a while. The assessment for the Ultimate Martial Arts School will end next month, and those who don't have enough credits will be eliminated in the third month." Her expression was very serious as she looked at Li Yueming and said seriously, "As a person, I can tell you that this is the safest way. The strength of the young people from our small planets is not on the same level as those from the big planets. In a sense, the second round of the assessment is specially prepared for the young people from the small and medium-sized planets. After you get in, you will enjoy the same treatment as others, so you don't have to feel embarrassed." Obviously, Lina thought that Yueming was not willing to participate in the second round of assessment because he was afraid of losing face. After all, for young people, especially those with pride in their hearts, it was unacceptable for them to admit that they were inferior to others. Lina had also participated in the Academy's assessment in the past. Therefore, he could understand Li Yueming's seemingly meaningless persistence. After all, if it wasn't for the lack of resources, their achievements in the same age group might not be worse than others. They didn't do anything wrong, so why should they pick up the second batch of spots that others had left empty? Of course, as her mental state matured, the resentment in Lina's heart slowly dissipated. There were too many people in the world who were unfair. There were also too many people who enjoyed the privilege of being high above. Being able to leave a path for the geniuses of small planets to leap over the Dragon Gate was already the biggest concession made by those who had already gained benefits. If it wasn't for the fact that the Zergs were invading the universe and needed to unite all life in the universe, it would already be good enough if they didn't plunder the various mineral resources on the small planet, not to mention leaving a path for the young people on the small planet to complete the transition of life level. However, Li Yueming obviously wouldn't wait for the first batch of geniuses to be eliminated before picking up the empty spots. He wasn't a genius, but a wall hanging on the wall. He didn't have that much effort, nor did he need to care about so many twists and turns. Therefore, he still said with a determined expression, "Ms. Anlina, please help me make some arrangements. I still want to apply for the Imperial Sun Ultimate Martial Arts School first." At this point, he paused. In order not to reject Anlina's good intentions, Li Yueming thought for a moment before adding, "However, your suggestion is indeed very reasonable, therefore, I will act according to my ability. If the young geniuses of those large planets are really too powerful and exceed the scope of my ability to deal with them, I will consider whether or not to participate in the second assessment." He looked at the serious Li Yueming in front of him. Anlina sighed. Actually, when she tried to persuade him, she knew that Li Yueming would not listen to her. After all, he was a young man who would never turn back until he hit a brick wall. He could only mumble and say with a tired heart, "All right, I'll bring you to the assessment venue first. When you realize the gap between yourself and others, you'll know that I'm actually doing this for your own good." Anlina was indeed doing this for the good of Li Yueming and the others. After all, from a certain perspective, their fates on this planet were bound together. Anlina needed more outstanding young people to be her stepping stones. On the other hand, the young people needed pioneers like Anlina to protect them from the wind and rain. There were no fundamental conflicts between the two sides, so there were naturally no more scheming. Seeing that her persuasion had failed, Anlina decided to bring Li Yueming to the Ultimate Martial Arts School tomorrow morning to take a look. Fan Li and Lu Dali's eyes lit up upon hearing this. Fan Li, who was even more thick-skinned, looked at Anlina with a pleading expression on his face. "Miss Anlina, can we go with you? Although we are not qualified to participate, just a glance from afar is enough to satisfy our fantasies about the Ultimate Martial Arts School." Chapter 806, Ultimate Martial Arts Academy, Assessment 2. An awkward expression appeared on Anlina's face. This made Fan Li and Lu Dali's hearts sink instantly. Fan Li hurriedly said, "If it's not convenient, then forget it. Forgive us for being presumptuous, ha ha ha." Although they really wanted to go to the Ultimate Martial Arts School to watch the show, they didn't want to put Anlina in a difficult position. Anlina pretended to pull out a vintage leather wallet from her pocket and unzipped it, only to find 2 coins inside. She said dejectedly, "Li Yueming has Evelyn's recommendation letter, so he can enter the Imperial Sun Star's Ultimate Martial Arts School without any other procedures. As his guardian, I can also skip the fees, but you two can't do it. I'll have to spend a lot of money." As she spoke, she narrowed her eyes and looked at Fan Li and Lu Dali. With a slightly threatening expression, she said, "I can buy tickets for you first, but no matter who gets rich first in the future, you have to remember to bring me along." Lu Dali and Fan Li were both stunned. A moment later, he blinked and teased, "Then you have to be prepared for your investment to go down the drain. After all, we're not some big black horse. It's already good enough that you don't have to take us flying in the future." "I understand." Anlina smiled. The black horse is warming up. Although she was older than Fan Li and Lu Dali, she could be considered young in the martial arts profession, so she didn't have any restrictions when chatting. Seeing the few of them chatting and laughing, only Li Yueming, who was a middle-aged man whose actual mental age far exceeded his appearance, felt a little at a loss for a moment. Early the next morning, Anlina arrived on time to pick up Li Yueming and bring him to the Ultimate Martial Arts School's assessment ground on the Imperial Sun planet. Because of the spaceship and the special flight route, it took less than 20 minutes to get to the ultimate martial arts school from his residence. The three of them were already mentally prepared to be shocked by the ultimate martial arts school's size and luxury. However, when the spaceship stopped at the designated parking area and Lina pointed at the inconspicuous signboard not far away, they began to doubt their lives because of the huge psychological gap. Not far away, there was a quaint and old courtyard. Outside the courtyard, there were already many young people with nervous and expectant expressions. At the top of the courtyard, there were a few wooden signboards with an even more ancient texture. On them were written the words Imperial Sun Star Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. This was the Imperial Sun planet. The entire planet was a product of the high-tech era. The metal houses and high-rise buildings around the wooden signboard were all high-end and classy. Under such circumstances, the signboard of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy of the Imperial Sun planet seemed too inconspicuous. Sensing their confusion, Lina also stepped forward and answered, "Do you think that the Ultimate Martial Arts School is different from what you imagined?" "The difference is a little big." The few of them nodded. It was not just different from what they had imagined. The difference was simply too big. Their alma mater on Planet 7 to 20,003 was not so simple. If Lina hadn't told them everything, and if they hadn't been surrounded by luxuriously dressed young people, they wouldn't have believed that this was the ultimate goal of countless young martial artists in the entire Imperial Sun galaxy, the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. Lina naturally guessed what they were thinking, and she couldn't help but smile. "Isn't it good to have a bigger gap?" The Ultimate Martial Arts Academy of the Imperial Sun Star was established when the Imperial Sun Star was first developed. It has lasted for 2 eras until now, and now you are seeing what it looked like 2 eras ago. You should feel honored. Hearing this, Fan Li and Lu Dali felt a little better, but their expressions were still bitter. They nodded reluctantly and said, "All right, no matter what, this is the Ultimate Martial Arts School on the Imperial Sun planet. Even if we were to take a look at it from afar, it would be enough for us to make this trip." Both of them were visitors, so although they felt that it was a little unreasonable, they did not say much. Li Yueming, on the other hand, was sensitive enough to notice the problem and asked, "Such a small campus, even the few of us can tear it down. How can it accommodate so many geniuses from the entire universe?" Seeing that they were all doubting their own lives, Lina stuck out her tongue and said honestly, "Ha ha ha. All right, I'll stop teasing you guys. The Ultimate Martial School of the Imperial Sun planet couldn't possibly be so shabby." The reason why it was so shabby was because this place was an old campus from the first era. It was a first-class protected cultural relic of the Imperial Sun planet. It was only open for enrollment now. The real Imperial Sun planet Ultimate Martial Arts Academy's third-era campus is actually not on the Imperial Sun planet at all. It's on the Martial Guard 43 planet outside the Imperial Sun planet. At this point, she paused and waited for the three of them to come to their senses before saying, "That's right, the current campus of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy is made up of an entire satellite." Lu Dali and Fan Li's eyes widened. Their initial disappointment was finally replaced by anticipation. "Let's go. We'll go and verify our identities first. Soon, a special car will send us to the assessment site. Our spaceship can't go to that kind of high-security venue." With that, Lina led the three of them into the old corridor. Due to the high threshold, there weren't many students lining up at the school. Li Yueming and Lina had special recommendation slots, so they could enter and leave the campus freely. Lu Dali and Fan Li didn't, and each of them had to pay 30 million universe credits. Hearing this amount, not only Lu Dali and Fan Li, even Li Yueming was shocked. The 10 million yuan scholarship he had received at the Starry Sky Martial Academy sounded like a lot, but he couldn't even afford a ticket to the Ultimate Martial Academy after he went to the Imperial Sun planet. After buying the tickets, the three of them followed the staff's guidance to the door to wait for the car. Looking at the group of students around him, although they had not actually fought, he could still feel their high-spirited looks. There was no doubt that the young people who had the confidence to set foot in this area were all the top geniuses in the entire universe. Just by standing with them, Fan Li and Lu Dali, who were also young people, already felt a huge pressure. And Lina glanced at Li Yueming with a half-smile. The Imperial Sun Star's ultimate martial arts school is the best school even in the third cosmos, so the students standing around you are not only from the Imperial Sun Star field, but also the top geniuses from other star fields who came here from afar. How is it? Would he still be able to show his previous imposing manner here? She had spent so much effort to do so, and her ultimate goal was to dispel Li Yueming's arrogant thoughts. After all, being down to earth was a virtue. Being immersed in fantasy and not knowing the immensity of heaven and earth would unknowingly destroy oneself. She was really optimistic about Li Yueming's future. She didn't want Li Yueming to regret it for the rest of his life because of her reckless actions. That was why she was so concerned. Even Lu Dali and Fan Li could feel her painstaking efforts. At this moment, they couldn't help but persuade her, "Brother, you only have one chance to apply for the Imperial Sun Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. Don't take things too hard and sign up now. We come from a small planet, and our resources are far inferior to those geniuses from the big planets. It's not embarrassing to apply for the second round. As long as you can get in, there are many examples of geniuses from small planets turning against geniuses from big planets after obtaining the same resources. It won't be too late for you to exert your strength at that time, right?" Looking at the worried faces of the few people who were deeply afraid of him, Li Yueming smiled and said, "I'm not stupid. If I really feel like it's not going to work, I'll take a step back." But they hadn't even reached the assessment location yet. Whether or not it would work, they still had to see it on the spot before they could make a decision, right? Chapter 807, A Life and Death Battle, The Test Scene. 1. Li Yueming knew what Lina, Lu Dali, and the others were worried about. There were tens of thousands of martial arts schools in the Emperor Yang Star field, and many of them were well known in the Emperor Yang Star. However, the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy was unique, and only it was slightly famous in the entire third universe. Therefore, the difference between getting into the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy and not getting into the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy would be quite large. With the potential he had shown, as long as he did not participate in the first round of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy's assessment like a hothead and obediently waited for the first batch of students to be eliminated before participating in the second round of the assessment that was specifically aimed at the geniuses of small planets, it was completely possible for him to enter. What did this mean? This not only meant a turning point in Li Yueming's own fate, but it might even be a turning point for the fate of the entire planet 7 to 20,003 and its billions of people. After graduating from the Imperial Sun Star's Ultimate Martial Arts Academy, he would be directly assigned to the core position of the military committee. In the future, he would have the opportunity to step onto the super stage of the universe. A powerhouse of this level had the ability to change the fate of a planet or even a star field. Therefore, they told Li Yueming not to be impulsive and to take the safest path to get in. Li Yueming also knew that this matter was of great importance. It was related to his development trajectory in the next 10 or even 20 years. Therefore, he didn't try to be brave or take a huge risk. He just said that he would take a look at the situation first. If he really found that it was beyond his ability, he would choose a safer plan. Of course, even though he had explained it this way. However, Lina, Fan Li, and the others clearly didn't believe him. After all, they had already determined that Li Yueming insisted on being the first batch to participate in the assessment because he did not want to lose to others. How could he give up so easily? Perhaps he would only lower his head and recognize reality after witnessing the terrifying battle at the assessment site. He thought about it. The Ultimate Martial Arts Academy's express train to welcome the freshmen to the examination hall had already arrived. The students waiting in the waiting room in a long queue began to slowly rush into the train. Li Yueming and the others took out their temporary residence permits. The thin LCD card was both their identification card and proof of residence. As long as they had tickets to enter the examination hall or a quota, they could hold the card and get on the car. The smart system would automatically detect it. The hover train had a special track. Unlike other public transportation tracks, there were only a few trains passing by. There were hundreds of armed robots patrolling around. Judging from the specifications of the track and the androids, they should all be military grade. Only the ultimate martial arts school in the entire Imperial Sun Galaxy would be able to use a military-grade military track to transport new weapons. The train was traveling at a very fast speed, much faster than Lin's spaceship. About 10 minutes later, the train plunged into the ground, and after passing through a long, dark tunnel, a vast underground space appeared before them. There was no natural sun in the underground city, but there were several artificial suns that consumed a lot of power. When he looked up at the virtual sky, other than feeling that the light was a little dazzling, there was basically no difference from the surface in other aspects. The few of them could not help but marvel at the powerful technology of the Imperial Sun Star again. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't even dare to think about such superb technology under normal circumstances. After entering the underground, the train slowed down. About 2 minutes later, the train finally arrived at the destination. After the hover train stopped, the group of students also got off the train and looked around curiously. Li Yueming and the other two were at the back of the group, while Lina introduced them as she walked. This is the second old campus of the Ultimate Martial Arts School from the last era. In the past, the level of secrecy was quite high. Although it's not completely idle now, it's already on the verge of being idle. Because it was moved out of the Interstellar Committee's most confidential unit more than 300 years ago, the Ultimate Martial Arts School's examination venue has been set up here for more than 100 years. At this point, the few of them had already walked out of the hover train. Lina stopped in her tracks and took a deep breath before warning with a stern expression, "However, don't think that you can walk around freely just because the lockdown of the highest level of security has been lifted. If you don't follow the rules and step into the restricted area, it's not a big deal to be expelled from the Ultimate Martial Arts School. In serious cases, your entire family may be locked up in prison for the rest of your life." The three of them were flabbergasted. However, when he thought about it carefully, there were countless young geniuses and powerful teachers in the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. There were also many scientific research projects related to the defense of the Zergs. It was no longer a simple school. They could be considered the first line of defense against the Zergs in the Imperial Sun starfield. Therefore, it was right to have a high level of military blockade. Normally, the outside world would not be able to get close to this area. After the students got out of the car, there were specialized bio-robots leading the way. There were even more guards along the way, as well as areas that were strictly prohibited from entering. Although the students looked around curiously, they all followed closely behind the main group, not daring to take a single step. Chapter 808, A Life and Death Battle, The Test Scene. 2. From afar, Li Yueming and the others heard a whistle coming from the second underground campus. Although they had not seen it for themselves, everyone could already feel the smoke of gunpowder in the upcoming assessment. They did not walk too far. After passing through a long metal corridor, everyone's eyes suddenly opened up. They saw an almost pure white space in front of them. The space was very vast, and there were already hundreds of Union gods gathered above to look at the young students below. From afar, this scene seemed a little strange. However, when they got closer, they realized that there was a huge piece of flawless glass under their feet. Through the glass, they could see the vast land hundreds of meters away that looked like an alternate dimension. There were potholes, swamps, jagged boulders, and hills covered in yellow sand. And in the center of it was a majestic mountain. At this moment, there were a few figures in ragged clothes fighting on the mountain peak, stirring up waves of sand and dust. and Lina was obviously no stranger to this place. Due to the special nature of her job, she had visited the Imperial Sun Academy many times before, and she was very much aware of her role as a guide. The area we are currently in is the viewing area. The complex terrain simulation field below us is the assessment area. Those students who fought on the peak top should be the winners of this assessment. Li Yueming and the others finally understood what was going on. There were no problems with watching the battle and taking the assessment. The only thing that made them feel a little uncomfortable was standing on such a glass and looking at the examination hall. Fan Li looked around and saw that no one was paying attention to him. He then asked in a low voice, "Ms. and Lina, what about the protective measures for this assessment? Why don't I see them wearing protective gear?" And Lina had a strange expression on her face. "Where do you think this is?" Fan Li felt his hair stand on end from her stare and couldn't help but say guiltily, "The examination room of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. Is there a problem?" And Lina rolled her eyes. The Ultimate Martial Arts Academy is the cradle of war machines in the Imperial Sun system. What makes you think that you can get something as childish as protective gear for your exams here? The examination hall is the battlefield, and this is the cultivation philosophy of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. Therefore, during the examination, no protective measures will be given to the examinees. If they feel that their condition is not good, the only way to survive is to raise their hands and surrender and wait for rescue. Of course, if the teachers of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy don't have time to rush over to save you, then I'm sorry, you might become food for the captive zergs in the examination hall. The death rate of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy's assessment has never been low. Of course, it doesn't mean that you're safe after you're admitted. The death rate might even be higher." Hearing her words, Fan Li couldn't help but shiver. To be honest, it was not that he had never fantasized about entering the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy to bring glory to his ancestors. However, he did not expect that he would have to gamble his life to participate in just one assessment. The danger and cruelty in it made his heart involuntarily turn cold. Even Lu Dali's expression changed. One could imagine how terrifying the word death was to young people. Li Yueming didn't have much of a reaction. After all, life and death had long been a common occurrence for him. This kind of assessment concept ignited the blood that had been dormant for a long time since he came to this world. Compared to a real life and death battle, the special referee's assessment on Planet 7 to 20,003 was more like a child's play to him. Just as they were still chatting, the battle on the peak below had come to an end. A tall and thin student was punched in the chest by another short and fat student, almost falling off the cliff. He raised his hand unwillingly to admit defeat. In the next second, a line of names appeared on the electronic screen not far away. Assessment Result List. First place, Lin Xiu. 1,322 credits, ranked 10th on the overall leaderboard. Second place, Suran. 11,247 credits, ranked 37th on the overall ranking. Third place. After the results were out, the entire spectator stand was in an uproar. The students who landed in the forest were almost wiped out by the zergs. The students from Giant Rock Peak got a great bargain. A student nodded and echoed, "The casualties are too tragic. These are all famous geniuses. Who knows how many schools would fight for them outside, but now they can only turn into dust in such a place." Some students were even indignant. The Ultimate Martial Arts Academy's assessment is too bloody. Is such a life and death battle really worth it? Li Yueming, Lu Dali, and the others looked down the list. There were a total of 50 students in this exam. However, other than the 5 students who were ranked at the front, the other 45 students were all marked as failed. And the most glaring thing was at the very end of the rankings. There were a total of 8 students' avatars on it with the word death written in bright red. This was the assessment of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. There was no reason or rules to enter the arena to fight and then survive. It was all the rules of the entire exam. Students killed each other, and the captive Zergs attacked crazily. Even if he wanted to end it, he might not be able to save his life. It could be said that other than the special factor of the examination, beneath his feet was a battlefield. Under the students pointing and gossiping, they could even see the bones of the students who had died on the battlefield through the glass windows. Their bodies were in tatters, and their limbs were in unnatural postures. Their skin and flesh had been gnawed on by something. It was hard to imagine what they had experienced before they died. Not to mention Lu Dali and the others, even the geniuses from the big planets were so scared that their faces turned pale and their bodies trembled. Very soon, a staff member came out to clean up the area. After finding all the corpses that could be found, the second round of the assessment soon began. Similarly, 50 students entered the examination ground. Their primary goal was not to pass the examination, but to survive in the examination hall. Then, they would consider how to kill a few more Zergs to obtain the final victory. A familiar whistle sounded. The students under their feet walked out from the teleportation points in each area and began to rush towards the high ground in their respective directions. Lina stared at the battlefield beneath her feet, and a terrifying killing intent emanated from her body. Everyone followed her gaze, only to see that after the students left, the ground beneath their feet and the hidden buildings were crawling out one bug after another. Looking at the ferocious bugs that were as huge as wash basins, all the students who had never seen bugs before felt their calves cramping. Looking at the dense horde beneath her feet, Lina's killing intent subsided a little, and she turned to Li Yueming again. This is a first-class unit of the Zerg's shell. The soldiers at the front line jokingly call it the exploding bread worm. It belongs to the lowest species of the Zerg and can only do some transportation and logistics work. What the examinees have to do is to kill as many of them as possible. Every bug killed counts as 10 points. Among them, there is a queen of the bread worm. If you are lucky enough to find and kill it, you can directly get 300 points. There will be about 10 minutes of free time after the Zerg trial ends. You can choose to leave the examination hall directly or continue to participate in the battle. If you are not satisfied with your score, or if you have not reached the basic assessment score of 1000 points and want to get more points, you can choose to climb up that peak to fight. Chapter 809, The Assessment Begins, Get Ready to Kill. 1. Therefore, if you don't have absolute confidence, don't easily try to register for the first round. Otherwise, putting aside the other powerful opponents for the time being, just the Zergs released from the assessment ground may require the examinees to pay the price in blood. Lina felt a little more at ease when she saw Li Yueming's solemn expression. Li Yueming was confident that he could stand out in the first round of the assessment. Now that she had seen the tragic state of the students under her feet, she believed that as long as Li Yueming's brain was not completely destroyed, he should know when to give up. The first round of assessment was too bloody, and the competition was far beyond the limits that the geniuses of small planets could withstand. Only a very small number of geniuses who were born on large planets and had fought with the Zergs before could stand out in this life and death battle. Lina's expression softened a little at this thought, and she said in a more relaxed tone, "This time, just treat it as me bringing you guys here to see the world. If you want to apply, it's best to follow my plan." Lu Dali and Fan Li nodded and echoed, "That's right, that's right. Let's just treat it as having gained some knowledge today. As for the assessment, let's wait a few months." If they were to say that they had persuaded Li Yueming to be safe, then now, after witnessing the cruelty and horror of the first round of assessment, they were sincerely persuading Li Yueming not to participate. After all, although the three of them were competitors on Planet 7 to 20,003, they were fellow countrymen who supported each other after coming to the Imperial Sun Galaxy. Persuading Li Yueming was not only for Li Yueming, but also for themselves. Seeing the three of them talking at once to persuade him to give up on the idea of participating in the first round of the assessment, Li Yueming couldn't help but feel a headache. If it was something else, he might have been able to compromise, but this was something that concerned the development trajectory of the next 10 or 20 years. After thinking about it, he insisted, "Miss Lina, Dolly, Fan Li, you might not know my strength yet. This assessment is really not a difficult thing for me." Hearing his answer, the three of them couldn't help but widen their eyes. "What? We don't know your strength? Isn't it difficult to pass this test?" Before Lu Dolly and Fan Li could say anything, Lina cursed in a low voice, "Are you crazy? He actually did not take his future and life seriously. Don't we know your strength? Lina has shown me your entire resume since you were a child. You only broke through to become a Class 1 martial artist 2 months ago, and the weakest among the students taking the test below you is a Class 3 martial artist. In addition, although the zergs hidden in the examination hall below us are the lowest level, only a level 2 martial artist can pose a threat to them. Do you think you can do it?" Lina's voice was filled with anger, and she was clearly very dissatisfied with Li Yueming's behavior. She had clearly tried her best to reason with him, but Li Yueming was still as stubborn as a bull. Fan Li and Lu Dolly also opened their mouths, apparently wanting to say something. However, Li Yueming slowly shook his head at them, indicating that there was no need to say anything more. He ignored all the dissuasive voices and said with a firm gaze, "I've made up my mind. You don't have to persuade me anymore." As he spoke, he paused and comforted, "Don't worry, I'll give you a big surprise." Lina rolled her eyes, clearly infuriated. "I hope you're not crazy. Otherwise, you'll really become a fool if you die for nothing." She hoped that Li Yueming would follow her plan, but she wasn't Li Yueming's mother or anything. Now that Li Yueming didn't listen to her advice, she could only give up. Shaking his head, he made way and said, "Turn left from this side of the registration area. There are teachers from the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy there. Hand over your identity card ticket to them. After your identity is verified, you can officially participate." Li Yueming nodded. Without any hesitation, he made his way toward the direction Lina had pointed at. Lina could only shake her head with a sigh as she watched him leave. She had always had a good impression of Li Yueming, but she didn't expect him to treat her like a donkey's liver and lungs even though she had tried so hard to dissuade him. This made her sad and disappointed. Beside him, Fan Li and Lu Dolly couldn't help but comfort him. "Ms. Lina, don't be too angry. Li Yueming might really have the guts to do this. After all, he wasn't the kind of person who didn't care about the consequences." Lina remained silent. A moment later, he laughed at himself and said, "I hope so." Following the direction Lina was pointing at, Li Yueming soon arrived at the registration location for the Ultimate Martial Arts School. Other than him, there were also many students lining up to register. When Li Yueming came over, almost all the students in the queue looked at him coldly. His gaze contained scrutiny, vigilance, and a faint hostility. The young people present might be classmates or comrades who needed to stand shoulder to shoulder in the future. Chapter 810, The Assessment Begins, Get Ready to Kill. 2. But now, they all had the same identity. Naturally, no one would be kind to their competitors. Li Yueming turned a blind eye to it and went straight to the end of the line to line up. About 5 minutes later, the students in front of him had already registered, and it was finally his turn. Li Yueming handed over his temporary residence card. The person in charge of registration was a white-haired old man. After receiving the temporary residence card, he skillfully swiped it on the machine. Li Yueming's personal information appeared on the LCD screen. The old man glanced at Li Yueming's personal information on the LCD screen, then glanced at Li Yueming. After a moment of silence, he adjusted his glasses and said, "Are you sure you want to apply for the first round?" "Yes." Li Yueming nodded. The old man took his identity card and said, "I have to tell you first that the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy will not give you a single cent of compensation if you die in the examination hall. This requires a signed contract, so have you really thought it through? I'm sure. Li Yueming nodded. The old man sized up Li Yueming as if he was looking at a lunatic. After a while, he turned to the computer terminal and went through the procedures for Li Yueming. Go over there and sign the death responsibility form. Then, someone will lead you to the preparation room. It will be your turn after the last batch of students finish their exams. Li Yueming nodded and was about to take the temporary residence card from the old man. However, the old man did not hand it over to him directly. Instead, he said, "You still have a chance to regret it before the exam officially begins. Young man, don't blame me for not reminding you to do less stupid things." Li Yueming knew that the other party had good intentions, but such good intentions were undoubtedly a burden to him. If he had known that it would be so troublesome, he would have filled in the rank of level 2 martial artist. Rank 1 martial artists could be considered the best among the young people on planet 7 to 20,003. However, after coming to the Imperial Sun Star, even dogs were probably one level higher than him. After receiving the card, he smiled politely and said, "Thank you for your reminder, sir." Then, he left quickly. Although the small episode that happened just now wasn't very long, it still attracted the attention of many students who were applying for the exam. After all, under normal circumstances, the teachers of the Ultimate Martial Arts School wouldn't talk so much. But now, Li Yueming had spoken a lot about it alone. Naturally, it was not normal. With so many people present, there were naturally some sharp-eyed people. When they swiped Li Yueming's identity card, someone had vaguely glanced at it. At this moment, he was a little dumbfounded and said to his companions around him, "This guy seems to be a level 1 warrior." Once this news spread, instantly, all the examinees in the exam room widened their eyes. What is a level 1 martial artist doing here? Doesn't he know that we are at least level 3 martial artists? I don't know. He seems to be a disciple from a remote small planet. Where did he get a place to apply for the Ultimate Martial Arts School? Didn't the elder who gave him the place tell him about the danger here? It's f***ing ridiculous. He really doesn't want to live. The group of students who had successfully applied for the exam whispered among themselves. Even the teacher who signed the disclaimer contract for Li Yueming looked up repeatedly when he heard this, causing Li Yueming to be a little confused for a moment. Damn it, all of you are geniuses. Do you have to be so gossipy? Besides, isn't it good for you to have a weak competitor? Can you leave me some face? Fortunately, the students only discussed it for a while before they shut up. After all, compared to meddling in other people's business, it was more important for them to take care of their own affairs and adjust their mentality to prepare for the upcoming assessment. There was also a viewing platform in the preparation area. Moreover, the field of vision was clearer than the spectator stands outside. At this moment, the previous batch of students were struggling to hold on under the siege of thousands of Zergs. Let alone killing a few more Zergs. He was already proud enough to be able to ensure that he was not injured. Under normal circumstances, the best time for the examinees to score was before the Zergs had completely gathered to form an army, and when the Zerg army retreated. Only these 2 periods of time would allow them to catch a few lone Zergs and kill them. Now, when the Zerg swarms gathered to form an army, it was very difficult for the examinees to accurately kill a single Zerg. It was not Li Yueming's first time seeing Zergs. However, what he had encountered in the past was too terrifying. This was the first time he had come into close contact with such a low-level Zerg. About 10 minutes later, the assessment time was basically over. The bug tide began to retreat slowly. The exhausted examinees who had been besieged were all invigorated and started to blow the horn to fight back. Of course, even though it was called a counterattack, it was actually just blocking the retreat route of a few Zergs, and then separating them from the main force so that they could be killed easily. The assessment had basically come to an end here. The next step was to see who could obtain a higher score and pass the assessment. At this moment, more than 10 Ultimate Martial Arts Academy teachers appeared in the preparation area. All of them had serious expressions and emitted the aura of powerful martial artists. The strongest fighter Li Yueming had seen so far was probably the Commander-in-Chief of the Military Committee on Planet 7 to 20,003, Evelyn. He could feel the destructive aura from her. However, even Evelyn was nothing in front of the teachers from the Ultimate Martial Arts School. If he was not wrong, the other party was at least a martial artist above level 10. After all the teachers had arrived, a teacher wearing the head examiner badge on his chest stood out. He swept his gaze across the examinees present and slowly said, "The ultimate goal of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy's training is to go to the battlefield. The battlefield is where blood is shed and sacrifices are made, so we don't welcome cowards here. No matter what your purpose of joining the Ultimate Martial Academy is, whether it's for the sake of all mankind or the entire universe, or simply to enjoy glory and wealth when you go out. But today, you all have the courage to participate in the assessment, which is worthy of praise. So let me confirm once again, are you all ready to die?" The group of students at his feet was very quiet. However, their determined gazes had already expressed their intentions. The head examiner nodded in satisfaction. "The assessment has officially begun. I hope that you will become the pillars of our human race in the future." As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding teachers waved their arms. Instantly, the 50-plus students present all blacked out. There was a strange feeling in his body. After the strange feeling faded, the students opened their eyes again and realized that they had already arrived in the examination hall. Li Yueming also experienced this magical method. Although he didn't know how the teachers did it, Li Yueming was keenly aware that the strange energy just now had the same origin as the reincarnation mark. It was probably a complicated method of space exchange. He could not understand it for the time being, nor did he need to understand it, because there was a more important matter at hand, which was to enter the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy and completely establish his identity as a genius. Thinking of this, he stood up straight and looked around. He realized that he should be in the forest area of the examination hall. There were many trees in this area as a shelter. It was suitable to avoid the pursuit of the Zergs, but it was not suitable for Li Yueming to kill. Therefore, he jumped straight to the top of the jungle. After identifying his position, he rushed to the edge of the swamp area, which was more open and flat. Meanwhile, Fan Li, Lu Dali, and Enlina were looking for him among the students on the special single-sided glass. After looking around, the sharp-eyed Fan Li pointed at a figure that was moving rapidly through the forest and said, "Is that Big Brother Li?" Enlina's vision was clearly 10 times better than his. Hearing this, she looked at the place where he was pointing and nodded. "Yes, his starting zone is the jungle. As long as he isn't trapped, it's a good hiding place." Lu Dali, who reacted the slowest, scratched his head and said, "But why do I feel like he's running out of the forest?" Chapter 811, Shocking Everyone. 1. Under the gazes of the three people, Li Yueming was moving at an extremely fast speed. In the beginning, his actions did not attract the attention of the spectators. After all, there were many examinees moving at the same time as him. Basically, 99% of the examinees would immediately occupy the surrounding favorable terrain after they realized that they had entered the examination hall. A favorable terrain could resist the insect tide's attack well, but a bad terrain was not only disadvantageous to their performance. It might even put the examinee's life in danger. Thus, they had no choice but to react quickly. But a few minutes later, Li Yueming's figure became more eye-catching. Not only did he try to seize the advantageous terrain like the other students who were born in the jungle, but he was also rushing forward, as if he wanted to leave the jungle and head to the swamp area where no players wanted to stay. Moreover, he was extremely fast. Every time he jumped, his speed would exceed the limit of a normal player. Such a unique figure naturally attracted the attention of many students and teachers of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy not long after the examination began. That examinee's starting point was clearly in the forest, so why did he run outside? According to the official statistics, the jungle is undoubtedly the best. Not only is it more suitable for pulling the defense line when surrounded, but the trees and complex terrain will also hinder the Zerg's speed when they retreat. It's already the most suitable choice among the few starting terrains. If I was as lucky as him, I would definitely choose to hide in a nearby tree instead of wasting my time in the forest. Am I the only one who thinks that this player's speed is abnormal? And the direction he chose to move in was also very strange. Could it be that this fellow is going to abandon the forest and head to the swamp? The swamp is a smooth road. There will occasionally be mud restricting his movements. Are you crazy? He looked at the maverick Li Yueming at his feet. Almost everyone who was observing him was confused as to what he was trying to do. Of course, this question did not bother them for too long. 2 minutes later, Li Yueming had completely left the jungle and stepped into the swamp area. At this moment, the entire examination hall was filled with a strange calm before the arrival of a storm. Occasionally, a few examinees' figures could be seen shuttling through various areas, but they would soon disappear. After arriving at the wide and flat swamp area, Li Yueming slowly heaved a sigh of relief. This place basically had nothing to hide except for mud and some weeds. Under normal circumstances, it was definitely not suitable for defending or pulling, but it was very suitable for a battle of annihilation on flat ground. Li Yueming had already set his sights on this place when he was watching the battle. As he stood alone in the swamp area, the gazes of everyone around the examination hall instantly gathered on him. There was no helping it. At this moment, he was too conspicuous. The other examinees were frantically looking for a hiding spot to resist the incoming Zergs. Only he was alone, standing on a flat swamp. Even if he wanted to, it would be difficult to not attract attention. This guy is crazy. He really stopped in the swamp. What is he trying to do? The swamp basically doesn't have any geographical advantage, right? Has this guy really gone through systematic learning? I heard that this candidate's name is Li Yueming. He comes from a remote planet in the Witch star system with the number 7 to 20,003. He seems to be a level 1 martial artist until now. F***CK, a level 1 warrior? Really? Where did a rank 1 martial artist get a place to apply for the examination? That's not right. Under normal circumstances, shouldn't the enrollment of small planets only begin 2 months later? Who knows what's going on? Maybe this guy doesn't even understand the difficulty of the Ultimate Martial Arts School's assessment. No matter what, this matter sounds quite ridiculous. Didn't he have an elder who was familiar with the rules tell him not to do this? This was because Li Yueming's performance was too abnormal. Soon, his personal information was pulled out by many examinees. Lina and the others didn't know whether to laugh or cry upon hearing their discussion. Perhaps they never dreamed that Planet 7 to 20,003 would be noticed by the geniuses of the high-level planets in such a way. If Li Yueming were to lose miserably in this assessment, Planet 7 to 20,003 would probably become the laughing-stock of the examinees for a long time to come. However, there was nothing they could do at the moment. He could only silently pray that Li Yueming wasn't bragging before and that he really had a certain degree of confidence in this assessment. Otherwise, losing face was a small matter. He was afraid that he would lose his life in the examination hall if he was not careful. Under the gazes of many examinees, with the sound of a whistle, the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy's assessment was finally about to begin. In the examination hall, airdrop supply boxes that were several meters long descended from the sky. Inside were some high-level weapons and defensive equipment forged by the Military Industry Committee. After the supplies landed, the students had 1 minute to search for them and fight for them. After a minute, the Zergs would awaken from their forced hibernation and tear apart all humans in their sight. Chapter 812, Shocking Everyone. 2. If the candidate did not manage to snatch the weapon within this 1 minute, then the exam would basically be over. If they did not want to die, it was best to surrender immediately and let the examiner pick them up. Otherwise, they would definitely be very passive in the next insect tide. It was because even martial artists would find it difficult to break the Zerg's carapace defense with their bare hands. They had to have a weapon that could break the Zerg's defense. Li Yueming was not anxious. This was because the airdrop supply boxes in other regions might be more popular resources. However, the swamp was a place where even dogs wouldn't stay. No one would fight with him for the dropped airdrop crate. As expected. About 10 seconds later, a 2-meter-long heavy box landed on the swamp not far from Li Yueming. Li Yueming walked over slowly and kicked the box away. There were knives, guns, sticks, tridents, hammers. There are more than 10 kinds of utensils. Li Yueming casually glanced inside. If he was fighting against a strong opponent, Li Yueming would undoubtedly choose the long saber. However, what he needed to do now was to cause as much damage as possible. The sledgehammer was naturally Li Yueming's most suitable super weapon. In terms of destructive power, hammer was the top guessed. After a quick glance, Li Yueming immediately chose the sturdy hammer from the airdrop box as his weapon. As soon as the heavy sledgehammer was in his hand, Li Yueming's mouth revealed an impatient smile. A few more airdrop crates landed in front of them. However, he did not care. His eyes were fixed on the Zerg's frozen cabin that had quietly appeared not far away. When the spectators saw Li Yueming not move after taking a weapon, they all gasped. This guy is really a hothead, right? Putting aside the heavy hammer, why didn't he go to the other boxes to find a set of defensive equipment? Was he really tired of living and rushing here to reincarnate? If there is any advantage in the swamp area, the only advantage should be that there are no other examinees fighting for the airdrop crate, right? In the end, there were several airdrop boxes in front of this guy, but he was completely indifferent to them. Then what is he doing in the swamp? The Ultimate Martial Arts Academy will have a few top-notch students appear in the assessment every year. The top-notch students in this examination are probably the examinees from this small planet, right? I can already imagine the scene of him being surrounded and eaten by the Zergs later. If you want to commit suicide, wouldn't it be nice to find a rope at home and hang him? He insisted on coming to experience the extreme pain of being bitten to death by the Zerg. You're really unreasonable. At this moment, almost all the examinees who were watching the battle gave Li Yueming a thumbs up. It couldn't be helped. He was really too good. He didn't look like he was here for the assessment at all. Instead, he looked more like he was in a hurry to commit suicide. The assessment had yet to officially begin, but there were already many examinees who could not help but close their eyes. They did not want to see the bloody and terrifying scene when Li Yueming was torn apart. No matter how many times one looked at that kind of thing, it would make one feel both mentally and physically uncomfortable. A minute passed quickly. The Zergs that were forcefully contained and imprisoned in the assessment ground had already been awakened by special potions. They were crawling out of their hibernation chambers. Looking at the familiar environment around them, they let out an angry neigh that made people's eardrums tremble. After being imprisoned by humans for so many years, the anger and resentment in their hearts were almost dense to the point of materialization. Under such circumstances, the Zergs did not have much rationality. They only wanted to tear and destroy everything, especially the humans who imprisoned them as research subjects. The dense swarm of bugs quickly formed up from the various hibernation chambers. Under the command of the bug tribe queen, they began to move towards the direction where the examinees were gathered. Thousands of half-meter-long bugs looked like a black torrent from afar. This was only the first batch of awakened Zergs. More Zergs would be awakened in the future until they killed all the hateful humans or were imprisoned by humans again. There was no doubt that a team of Zergs had arrived at Li Yueming's location. These bugs could identify the location of their prey by the smell in the air and the heat of the creatures. Because Li Yueming was alone in the swamp, there were less than 100 Zergs sent to attack him. It seemed like he was being treated as a weak link. However, this wasn't a bad thing. After all, If too many zergs came at once, it would be a big problem even for Li Yueming. 100 was just the right number. At this moment, the other examinees were still hiding in the dark and praying that the zerg would not attack them first. Li Yueming had already grabbed the hammer with one hand and charged straight at the zergs. This scene naturally couldn't escape the attention of the surrounding students and teachers. At this moment, they couldn't help but exclaim, "It's over, it's over. This guy is really going to die." No wonder he dared to stand alone in the swamp area. Previously, I thought he had some kind of strategy. I didn't expect him to directly charge towards the swarm of insects. Did he think that he was very handsome like this? This is only the first wave of the zerg horde. Although there aren't too many of them, once they are entangled by the zerg in front, when the zerg in the future wake up, they won't even be able to escape. Boorish man, it's fine if you don't take your own life seriously, but you don't take the zerg seriously? It's not that I want to say this, but you deserve to die. Li Yueming's action of pouncing towards the zerg was undoubtedly unreasonable to the surrounding examinees. The reason why the zergs were so powerful was not because of their individual combat strength, but because of their unique way of survival and reproduction. To the universe of order, the overwhelming zerg horde was the source of fear that was truly difficult to face. But now, Li Yueming clearly didn't understand this point thoroughly enough. Otherwise, it was absolutely impossible to perform such a cerebral hemorrhage operation. And Lina, who had been trying to persuade herself not to get angry, finally couldn't take it anymore. Veins were popping out on her fair face, and she turned to Fan Li and Lu Dali, who were standing beside her, and bellowed, "Didn't you learn how to face the zergs on planet 7-20003? Fan Li and Lu Dali broke out in cold sweat. No matter how unhappy Lina was, she didn't show her scary side. And now, her defense was clearly broken by Li Yueming. After all this time, she was jumping up and down like a clown. She even specially applied for a week of precious leave from the higher UPS. In the end, the student she had high hopes for was not a so-called genius, but a complete idiot. Anyone would feel their blood pressure rise. Wiping the sweat off his forehead, Fan Li said with a bit of confidence, "Of course we have." Before he could finish his sentence, Lina's furious roar and questioning voice came again. "You've learned it before, so why is he fighting the zergs now? Did poop enter your brain?" Lina was so emotional that she couldn't care less about her ladylike image anymore. Lu Dali and Fan Li lowered their heads at the same time. He was afraid that if he said another word, Lina would be unhappy and drive all three of them back to planet 7-20003 to farm. However, just as Lina was about to lose her mind. However, a shocking scene suddenly appeared on the battlefield. Li Ming was carrying a heavy hammer. Like a nimble swallow, he appeared beside the black mealworm in a few leaps. He raised the hammer in his hand gently and smashed it in a beautiful parabola as if it was alive. This hammer strike looked rather gorgeous. However, the explosive power was just right. It smashed onto the shell of the black-scaled mealworm without any more or less. "Pa-gee!" A dull and crisp sound rang out. The black-scaled mealworm that was hit by Li Yueming's hammer really exploded like a sandwich, and countless stinky green liquid splattered. Seeing this situation, with a whoosh, the entire examination hall fell silent in an instant. Chapter 813, Shocked Everyone, Black Beetle Queen. 1. Seeing the sudden scene in the exam hall, the entire spectator area fell silent. They didn't expect Li Yueming to take the initiative to rush over and fight the zergs. They didn't expect Li Yueming's attack to be so much fiercer than they had imagined. When they finally came back to their senses, many of the audience members were shocked. "Didn't you say that this guy is only a Class 1 martial artist? How could a Level 1 warrior kill an insect with a single strike? The source of the information must be wrong. It's impossible for a Level 1 martial artist to break through the shell defense of the black-shelled mealworm. Although that guy's brain is not very good, his strength might be stronger than we thought." Interesting. That guy is quite bold, but can he deal with so many zergs? Once he is entangled by the zergs and loses his agility, when the reinforcements of the zergs arrive, it will be a certain death. I hope this guy doesn't die so miserably. In the spectator stands, many examinees initially thought that Li Yueming was tired of living and was courting death. Everyone was waiting to watch a good show. Now that they realized that Li Yueming's attack power was extraordinary, they finally became a little more serious. They wanted to see what Li Yueming was up to. Not far away, Fan Li and Lu Dali also perked up. See, Li Yueming shouldn't be courting death. He has the ability to kill the zergs. Hearing this, Anlina's furious expression eased a little. However, he still had some anger left in him. So, what? He's carrying such a heavy hammer. He might be able to gain an advantage at the beginning, but as time goes on, his stamina and agility will definitely decrease. Once he's surrounded by the zergs, even a few more lives won't be enough to kill him. As a high-level martial artist who had a full understanding of the zerg race, Anlina was obviously much more knowledgeable than Fan Li and Lu Dali. A real battlefield is not a place where one's courage is displayed. Not only do you have to pay attention to tactics, but you also have to grasp the timing and the psychological state of both the enemy and yourself. Any slight deviation will lead to eternal damnation. It was also because of this that she was so angry with Li Yueming's behavior. Judging from the strength he has displayed now, if it was the second round of the assessment, he would most likely pass it. However, he insisted on putting on a brave front. How could the first round of the assessment be so easy? Hearing her analysis, both Lu Dali and Fan Li fell silent. As a fake theorist, the two of them were actually lacking in actual combat training. Even Lu Dali, who had experienced the most intense and exciting battles, had only fought with other challengers in the ring for a moment. However, this was the first time that he had truly gambled his life on a battlefield like today. Therefore, when they saw that Li Yueming had the upper hand, they thought that the situation had been reversed. However, this was not the case. Before the assessment ended, danger would still exist at all times. Beneath his feet, Li Yueming smashed a black beetle with his hammer. After smashing its juice, he had a rough idea of the defense and mobility of this group of beetles. In a few flashes, he was pushed back dozens of meters. After realizing that one of their comrades had been killed in the blink of an eye, the rest of the bugs that were attacked in front of them were all extremely angry. The elite black beetle with two special patterns on its shell let out a shrill screech. The surrounding zergs seemed to have received an order. They began to divide into 3 teams and surrounded Li Yueming from 3 directions. Over 100 bugs were split into 3 teams. Each team had over 30 zergs. Obviously, this elite black beetle didn't realize how terrifying this human was. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to divide their forces and fight on the basis of insufficient strength. After discovering that the zergs had separated, Li Yueming's eyes flashed. If he was still somewhat apprehensive when more than 100 zergs gathered together, now that they were separated into 3 teams, they completely lost their threat and intimidation. He looked around. After making sure that there were no other threats to the battlefield, he charged straight towards the team led by the elite black beetle. Obviously, he didn't want to make a move. If he wanted to make a move, he had to deal the most damage to these damn fellows. As long as he could kill this elite black beetle, the remaining dozens of black beetles would definitely panic for a short period of time. At that time, it would be easier for Li Yueming to defeat them one by one. The elite black beetle didn't expect Li Yueming to retreat instead of advancing. He actually dared to charge at him. In the past, when the weak humans saw them organize an army, without exception, they would wish they had 2 more legs. There was definitely no one like him who would rush into the encirclement when he clearly felt that he was about to be surrounded. The distance of tens of meters was gone in the blink of an eye. Although Li Yueming was holding a hammerhead that was about the same weight as himself, his speed was not as slow as people thought. He was only 2 to 3 meters away from the elite black beetle. Li Yueming smashed his hammer down heavily, just like how he smashed a black beetle. The black beetle felt a certain threat. It opened its mouth, which was filled with dense teeth, and spat out a stinky and terrifying corrosive liquid. Chapter 814, Shocked Everyone, Black Beetle Queen. 2. Obviously, it was not as easy to kill as the previous one. However, what happened next made everyone think that they were hallucinating. They saw Li Yueming, who had already leaped into the air, suddenly disappear. Then, he appeared behind the elite black beetle as if he had teleported. His huge hammer was like a falling mountain, smashing the elite black beetle's shell. Boom! A sonic boom shook the entire examination hall. Almost all the examinees who were in the middle of the assessment heard this strange sound. Even if they were facing the incomparably terrifying insect tide, they all looked towards the swamp area in shock and bewilderment. Even they felt the tremors. Not to mention the spectating students and teachers who had witnessed everything. Looking at the smoke-filled battlefield below their feet, many people were so shocked that they sat up from their seats. F***ck, what's this? It went over with a swoosh sound. Who can tell me what just happened? I don't know. It was as if Li Yueming had suddenly teleported in midair and smashed into the elite black beetle in an unimaginable way. I didn't blink just now, but I still didn't see what happened clearly. It's f***ing ridiculous. Although that guy's speed is very fast, that last move of suddenly teleporting from the air is already not a martial arts technique that a low-level martial artist can master, right? That's right. Normal people can't adjust their direction in mid-air. Although martial artists can do it, they definitely can't do such an incredible operation. Therefore, there's only one explanation, and that is that Li Yueming has comprehended one or more martial arts moves. If I remember correctly, only level 5 martial artists are qualified to come into contact with martial arts techniques. Could it be that he has the strength of a level 5 martial artist? Even if he's a monster, it's impossible for him to break through to level 5 before he's 20. Because the scene just now had happened too suddenly. Only some of the higher level teachers could see Li Yueming's slow motion clearly. It's fine if his speed is so ridiculous, but just how much physical strength did he unleash with that hammer just now? I was f***ing dumbfounded. The terrain in the examination hall has been specially cultivated, right? An ordinary level 2 or level 3 martial artist wouldn't even be able to create a crater, but Li Yueming had directly caused the effect of a level 3 earthquake. This ridiculously strong physique, even the top geniuses of the Imperial Sun Star wouldn't be this terrifying, right? Who told me that guy came from a small planet? Oh my god, maybe there will be a huge upset in the Ultimate Martial Arts School assessment this time. The crowd of examinees in the spectator stands were all shocked silly by the commotion just now. At this moment, many of them were cursing in their hearts. When the smoke and dust dissipated, Li Yueming, who was still dealing with the Zergs, had long disappeared from the battlefield. When the group of people's hearts suddenly thumped, someone exclaimed, F***ck, that guy went to find trouble with another group of Zergs. Could it be that in just a short while, that elite black beetle and over 30 Zergs were wiped out by him? The isolation glass in the examination hall was protected. The examinees and the spectators could only see the situation inside with their naked eyes, but they could not use other methods beyond the naked eye to observe. After all, students who could participate in the Martial Arts Academy assessment might be big shots in the future. Some of the things they had at the back of their minds must not be spread to the outside world. That's why. When Li Yueming's hammer smashed down, the mud on the periphery of the swamp was sent flying. When their line of sight was blocked, the teachers and students in the spectator stands could not see what was happening under the cover. The only thing they could see was Li Yueming's figure quietly disappearing like a ghost. In a few ups and downs, he had already appeared in front of another of the 3 scattered groups of Zergs. The sledgehammer continued to dance in the air like a mountain in the netherworld. When it smashed onto the ground, it caused the entire ground of the examination hall to tremble again. Bang! Hearing the sound, the surrounding examinees who were still playing hide-and-seek with the zergs turned their gazes towards the swamp area. Because of the obstruction of their vision, no one could see what was happening over there. Therefore, they were all filled with doubts. This thunderous sound had indeed stepped on their cognitive blind spots. Did something happen in the swamp? That didn't seem right either. If an accident had really happened, the surrounding group of Ultimate Martial Arts Academy teachers would have taken action long ago. How could there be no movement at all? At this moment, the other examinees were all stunned. If it weren't for the bugs surrounding them, they would definitely find a better spot to see what was going on. At the edge of the swamp area, Li Yueming smashed the black beetle directly below into a ball of blurry meat paste with a hammer. Even the surrounding black beetles were sent flying into the air. His hands didn't stop at all, and he continued to spin the sledgehammer. As a result, the few zergs that were sent flying in the air were hit by the watermelon-sized hammer heads. In an instant, they were like pimples that had been squeezed open, leaving only a puddle of stinky mucus and shattered pieces of meat flying in all directions. After losing the command of the elite black beetles, the remaining two bug squads were clearly not as coordinated. This made Li Yueming's one-sided massacre even more convenient. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed into a walking tornado that swept through everything. In less than 10 minutes, more than 100 zergs who were sent to surround Li Yueming were smashed into a pile of meat paste by Li Yueming's hammer. Because of the shocking destructive power, even the entire swamp area was like it had been plowed by a cannon, covered in muddy and turbid water stains. Li Yueming had already broken through to level 2 martial artist. Although he had yet to break through to level 3 martial artist, it was only because he was unwilling to soar on a rocket. Therefore, the strength he could unleash now was definitely far beyond the limits of an ordinary level 3 martial artist. Even an ordinary level 4 martial artist would not be able to fight him head-on. If he added in all kinds of random enhancements and a deep foundation in various martial arts moves, Li Yueming's current combat strength should be infinitely close to a level 5 martial artist. Of course, this wasn't something worth showing off in Li Yueming's opinion. After all, he was a reincarnator of the personal power side. Before coming to this main plane, he had also trained in many personal power worlds. Whether it was experience or skill, they were far from what ordinary young people could compare to. If this was still not enough to surpass his peers, then he could only say that he had lived for so many years. Moreover, before a martial artist reached the threshold of level 6, the difference in strength was actually not that ridiculous. The difference between a level 1 martial artist and a level 4 martial artist was only the understanding of martial arts and the tempering of the body. Other than that, it could not even completely represent their combat strength. Only level 5 martial artists would start to try to learn the various martial arts moves developed by the Martial Arts Academy. Only level 6 martial artists above that could barely be considered as planet-level martial artists who could dominate a small planet. In other words, level 6 was the starting point for a true martial artist. Level 1 to level 5 were actually just novices, which was why Li Yueming was able to kill so many martial arts levels. He had just finished off more than 100 black beetles that had surrounded him. The Black Beetle Queen had already noticed the abnormality near the hibernation pod. Its scarlet eyes revealed a rare trace of fear. The Black Beetle Queen Zhangka let out a sharp roar. After a few breaths, thousands of black beetles quickly crawled out of the hibernation chambers behind it. A mighty torrent of steel rushed towards Li Yueming's direction under the Black Beetle Queen's signal. Obviously, compared to playing those boring games with those weak humans, the Black Beetle Queen wanted to kill a few more humans with potential in the assessment. This was the only way to relieve the pain of being imprisoned as a breeding machine. Thinking of this, the blood-red compound eyes of the Black Beetle Queen were filled with ruthlessness. She roared a few more times and mobilized more than 1,000 subordinates to surround them in another direction. It wanted to make these damned humans feel pain that was engraved in their bones. The Zergs would devour everything. Chapter 815, 323, Killing for Half an Hour? 1. Obviously, Li Yueming's sudden killing of more than 100 black beetles not only attracted the attention of the surrounding examinees, but at the same time, it also attracted the attention of the Black Beetle Queen, who was filled with hatred not far away. After all, so many of his disciples had been killed by the same person in a very short period of time. It was difficult not to attract attention. After discovering that Li Yueming was very likely to be the most powerful human genius in this assessment, he was shocked. The Black Beetle Queen, who was eager for revenge, sent out almost all of the black mealeaf beetles that could be mobilized under her command to attack Li Yueming. In order to not leave Li Yueming with any retreat, she even personally gave the order to mobilize an elite Zerg team to detour from the side, preparing for a surprise attack. There was a black mass of Zergs under his feet. There were probably more than 1,000 of them. Almost all the examinees watching the battle held their breaths at the same time. Some young people who had not seen much of the world could not help but exclaim, with so many Zergs pouncing at Li Yueming alone, won't the examiners of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy come forward to stop them? Hearing their words, someone in the surroundings asked in puzzlement, stop? If Li Yueming had no indication to give up the assessment, why did the examiner stop him? This answer obviously stunned those young people. After thinking for a moment, he said in astonishment, the other students in the examination hall are only facing hundreds of Zergs now, but the Zerg Queen has sent thousands of black beetles to kill Li Yueming. Isn't this targeting the outstanding candidates? It's not fair at all. The other examinees, who had been following the rules, were currently facing less than 100 Zergs. In the end, Li Yueming, who had the highest score, was about to face such a large number of Zergs. In their eyes, this scene was ridiculous. However, their opinion caused many people to laugh. 2. You still not understand? Although this was an examination hall, it was also a battlefield. Li Yueming had just completed a beautiful ambush, so he naturally had to bear the risk of being chased by the Zergs who had suffered heavy losses. Do you still want to talk about fairness with the enemy on the battlefield? Hearing this answer, the group of young people who raised the question were obviously shocked. He finally came back to his senses, and his voice was much softer, but he was still a little surprised and uncertain. But we shouldn't just watch him get killed by the Zergs, right? Some people shook their heads. The world has never lacked geniuses. What is truly lacking is a genius who is confident in his life and the battlefield. Li Yueming should have known the consequences of doing so when he attacked the Zerg team and made sufficient preparations for it, right? Taking a step back, if we were to launch an attack without making preparations, then it would be very fair for us to take the risk. There shouldn't be any problem with me saying this, right? The Ultimate Martial Arts Academy was really too famous. The students who came here to take part in the assessment every year were simply like carps crossing the river. They were all geniuses in their respective territories. However, the vast majority of the geniuses among them began to become ordinary and mediocre after coming to the stage of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy and standing with thousands of geniuses with similar talent. However, the radiance of those truly insufferably arrogant geniuses would not be concealed. Instead, they would appear even more dazzling because of the contrast of other geniuses. Therefore, during the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy's annual assessment process, sudden unexpected situations like Li Yueming's did happen from time to time. However, Li Yueming's birth was too ordinary. It was just that no one had thought of it in the beginning. However, just now, Li Yueming had taken care of a small team of hundreds of Zergs in a few minutes with a hammer. He had already attracted the attention of almost all the examinees and teachers around him. Now that everyone knew that Li Yueming was a dark horse who suddenly appeared in the assessment, they were all very curious about whether he could continue to turn the tables and kill a bloody path out of the impossible. In a special invigilator's seat far away from the spectator seats, the examiner of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy was staring at Li Yueming's every move. After a long time, he nodded and said, "Not bad, a good seedling." Behind him, the other invigilators also nodded and said, "It's been a long time since I've seen a student with such a solid foundation in martial arts skills. I wonder how long he can last after attracting attention." A teacher couldn't help but laugh and teased, "Maybe we can last until the end." The other teachers were also interested. They stared at Li Yueming for a long time before saying, "We've seen this kid's information, he probably won't be able to last until the end." However, for a young man from a remote area like 7 to 20,003 to be able to train up such solid abilities, this kid's talent and perseverance aren't inferior to the top geniuses of the universe. His future is promising, his future is promising. Obviously, the teachers were very optimistic about Li Yueming's performance. However, most of them thought that Li Yueming would not be able to complete all the assessments. This wasn't embarrassing. After all, Li Yueming was born on a small planet and was naturally lacking. To be able to reach this point with his hard work, he was definitely considered a top figure. Chapter 816, 323, Killing for Half an Hour? 2. As long as he entered the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy and made up for some of his shortcomings, he believed that he would be able to shine in a few years. A teacher looked at the head examiner and asked, "Teacher Liang, if this student can't hold on later, can we use the Emergency Rescue Authority?" The head examiner looked at Li Yueming and was silent for a moment before saying, "Wait a minute, I want to see how far this guy can go. It's better not to use the Emergency Rescue Authority. I'll allow you to warn that damn bug to take it easy. If it really goes too far, we have 10,000 ways to make it wish it was dead." The teachers nodded. In principle, they would not interfere with the assessment, but principles existed to be broken. If the examinee could amaze everyone with a single brilliant feat, even if they were in danger due to exhaustion or other reasons, the main examiner had a certain probability of launching an emergency rescue. Of course, this authority had not been used much since the start of the assessment. It would only be used in rare situations. Because this kind of preferential treatment would undoubtedly make others feel that it was unfair. A long time ago, it even caused a large-scale discussion. The Ultimate Martial Arts Academy's response to this was very simple. It was to remain silent and not reply. The fact that geniuses received preferential treatment was actually an unfair thing in itself. The current structure of society actually made this matter less unfair. After all, the Alliance of Law did everything they could to save and nurture geniuses, not to nurture a class of rent-averse, but to nurture soldiers who would go to the battlefield to protect their country. In the examination hall under his feet, Li Yueming had already moved from the swamp area to the junction of the jungle area and the swamp area. Although his vision had not seen everything, his intuition had already told him the enemy's location and direction. At this moment, he was standing on a big tree, looking at the surrounding area from afar, observing the movements of the bug tribe reinforcements. About 10 breaths later, Li Yueming keenly sensed the flood of insects in the distance. He looked over and saw thousands of insects crawling towards him at an extremely fast speed. Li Yueming narrowed his eyes. He held the warhammer and hit on the treetops silently. At this moment, his breathing became so faint that it could not be smelled. All the pores on his body were closed. This was a kind of extreme control over the body. Under normal circumstances, it was definitely not something that a martial artist of his realm could comprehend. However, Li Yueming was obviously not a normal person. As early as in the previous world, he had already grasped a considerable part of the secrets of the body. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the ability to open up the treasures and acupoints in his body. After merging his entire body with the tree, Li Yueming's figure silently appeared on another big tree like a withered leaf. The zergs that were charging at Li Yueming with an aggressive aura could not help but freeze at this moment. They looked around in confusion. The examinees on the surrounding viewing platforms could not understand why the originally aggressive zergs had suddenly become so cautious. Someone who knew the truth answered with a solemn expression, Li Yueming must have used a special method to seal off his opportunity. The low-level zergs like the black beetles are very backward in locking down their enemies. The black-shelled mealworms were the name that the Alliance of Order had given them. In fact, they were just a nameless low-level transport bug among the zergs. Therefore, many parts of their bodies were not actually evolved for combat. For example, the biggest function of their wide and huge back armor was not defense, but to carry weight. Its thick legs were not good at moving or running quickly. It was better at carrying weight and moving forward steadily. In addition to these two obvious characteristics, the other parts of the black beetle's body were the same. Therefore, their way of observing life forms in the outside world was very primitive and backward compared to other combat units. Other than their normal visual, they could only react to the aura and infrared temperature of the outside world. Now, not only had Li Yueming concealed his aura, but his body temperature had also fused with the surrounding environment. This made the black beetle bugs a little confused. They could clearly sense that the damned human was standing on a tree crown, but now, it was as if he had never existed. Sensing that the target had disappeared, the black-scaled mealworm immediately reported this information to the queen of its race. The queen's order was soon given: seal off the surrounding area, destroy all the trees, and find Li Yueming at all costs. After receiving the order, the black beetle quickly began to execute the plan. The two teams of black beetles added up to about 1,500. At this moment, they formed an oval formation and blocked Li Yueming's front and back respectively. They began to shrink their formation, trying to force Li Yueming out from hiding in the dark. However, they had clearly underestimated Li Yueming's courage. Just as they were still exchanging commands and preparing to gather together, Li Yueming had already made his move. He gently jumped down from a big tree and quietly appeared in the middle of hundreds of black beetles. His hammer swept through everything like a whirlwind. Pa-ji! Before the dozen or so unprepared black mealworms could even react, they were sent flying by the oncoming giant hammer. For a moment, the forest was filled with a disgusting dark green liquid. The group of students in the spectating area above them were all stunned at this moment. Some of them even couldn't help but widen their eyes and exclaim, "*MN, I actually landed directly in the middle of the zergs? Has he always been this brave?" The hammer can provide a very powerful attack power, but the weakness of this thing is also very obvious. It is too heavy and requires a lot of physical strength to use. Li Yueming doesn't care about the physical consumption at all. Can he really last until the end of the assessment? This ambush was really satisfying. As long as he doesn't get killed by the crazy zergs, he should be able to pass the assessment. The only unknown now is how many points he can get, and whether he can surpass Li Shengao, the first place in the assessment. Li Shengao is a super genius that only appears once in 100 years on the first planet of G5. His assessment score is close to 4,000. Li Yueming, a genius from a small planet, shouldn't be so ridiculous. Who knows? If he were to continue killing like this, everything would be unknown. It could be said that Li Yueming's sneak attack this time made many people's hearts skip a beat. However, it brought a strong sense of shock to the hearts of all the examinees in the examination hall. So the Ultimate Martial Academy's assessment could be passed like this? They didn't play any extra twists and turns at all and directly took the initiative to attack. In less than half an hour, they had already completed the score index of the other people's entire assessment. They didn't even need to obtain any more points to pass the assessment safely. At this moment, however, they were not the ones who were even more shocked. It was Anlina, Lu Dali, and the others who came from the same planet as Li Yueming. Fan Li's eyes were already as wide as his mouth. After a long while, he stuttered, Miss Anlina, Li Yueming had already passed the assessment with his current points. At this moment, Anlina was 10 times more shocked than him. After all, although Fan Li and Lu Dali had heard that the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy assessment was very difficult, they had never seen it with their own eyes. However, she often came here to watch. She had even seen countless famous geniuses fall here. Therefore, she knew better than Liu Dali and Fan Li how ridiculous Li Yueming's current operation was. On the surface, Li Yueming's every choice and operation after the assessment began seemed very simple. However, what was revealed was Li Yueming's unparalleled judgment of timing. Hearing Fan Li's question, Lina replied in a daze, yes, even if Li Yueming doesn't want a single point, as long as he can persist until the end of the assessment, he can enter the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. Chapter 817, An Unrivaled Stance. 1. It had only been half an hour since the exam started. Li Yueming had actually completed a kill that the other examinees might not have been able to complete. And in such an unscrupulous manner. Even Lina, Liu Dali, and the other two were shocked, let alone the spectators. They came from Planet 7 to 20,003 together with Li Yueming, so they knew Li Yueming better than others. However, it was precisely because of this that they found it even more difficult to understand. They were clearly from the same planet as Li Yueming, and the education and resources on Planet 7 to 20,003 were not much different. How could they be able to suppress the geniuses of other big planets in the examination hall of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy? In less than half an hour, they obtained results that many examinees could not even hope to achieve in their lifetime, but they did not even have the qualifications to stand on this stage. As expected, there were times when geniuses were really unreasonable. If they hadn't witnessed all of this with their own eyes, Liu Dali, Fan Li, and Lina probably wouldn't have believed that there was such a despairing gap in the world. It had nothing to do with the individual or the hard work. They were born at the same starting line, but their talent and aptitude lagged behind others from the beginning. The three of them were stunned for a moment. In the examiner's special spectator area, the head examiner Liang Run's eyes were glowing as he said ecstatically, without a doubt, this is a person born for martial arts. This is what our Ultimate Martial Arts Academy is tirelessly pursuing. The final genius. The few accompanying teachers around him wanted to find a reason to refute. However, looking at Li Yueming, who was still moving around the examination hall like a god of death, he did not know how to speak. It was too beautiful. It was simply too beautiful. Every turn, every rise and fall, every smooth body movement when exerting force, all the details were like art, filled with solid basic skills that had been tempered thousands of times. There was no doubt that the student under his feet had an extremely deep understanding of martial arts. As the saying went, outsiders looked at the door, while professionals looked at the technique. Most of the people could only see Li Yueming killing people. However, there were very few people who could understand how Li Yueming exerted his strength and control his muscles when he moved. And this group of spectating teachers could understand it without a doubt. It was precisely because of this that they could not say a word for a long time. After all, no matter how picky they were, it was difficult to find any flaws in Li Yueming's artistic performance. In the examination hall, Li Yueming's battle continued. However, because the enemy was in the open and he was in the dark, this so-called battle was actually a one-sided massacre. He hid in the forest like a ghost, frantically appearing from every corner, hitting the target with one strike and then immediately pushing away. In the past, the black beetles that were called walking catastrophes by countless examinees in the examination hall did not have any strength to retaliate in front of him. They were really like bugs that could be easily trampled to death. In the beginning, the black beetle queen did not take it to heart. After all, it was normal for humans to be lighter than heavy-duty beetles when they were at full speed. However, running at full speed and suddenly attacking required physical support. The two black beetle teams that she sent out had more than 1,500. Even if they lined up for Li Yueming to kill, Li Yueming would not have that much strength to kill them all. However, the Black Beetle Queen soon realized that she had underestimated that damn cunning human. Half an hour had passed. Under normal circumstances, even a level 4 martial artist should not be able to maintain their peak condition in such a high-intensity battle. However, Li Yueming was like a killing machine that did not know fatigue. He was still waving his sledgehammer in the forest and attacking crazily. Moreover, according to the information reported by the Black Beetle team, Li Yueming's physical fitness and killing efficiency did not decrease. Instead, because of practice, he became more efficient. They would usually appear silently on top of a big tree and jump down when a black beetle approached. The sledgehammer in their hands was like a precise guided bomb. Every hammer could hit the more fragile head of the black beetle, causing shocking damage to the surrounding black beetles. In order to prevent Li Yueming from launching a sudden attack at any time, the Black Beetle Queen ordered the two teams to tirelessly push down all the trees in the forest that could hide creatures. At this moment, the tall trees and shrubs at the edge of the forest had been completely toppled by them. Only by doing so could they stop the death god that could come at any time. The insect swarm was in a sorry state. The original 1,500 strong army was now reduced to 1,200 strong. Even now, they were still taking turns to push down the trees in the forest. In the examination hall, the examinees who were originally fighting with the Zergs were already in a mess. Even though they were still fighting, their attention was constantly looking at the edge of the forest not far away. Hundreds of trees had fallen. Not only did this speed not slow down, but it also continued to accumulate and increase. The group of examinees' minds were filled with vigilance and doubt. What were these Zergs doing? Chapter 818, An Unrivaled Stance. 2. Was he trying to expel all the examinees from the forest by crazily pushing down the trees? However, the problem was that even if the examinees were driven out of the forest, the examinees still had other areas to hide in. At most, it would be more cramped. What was the point of spending so much effort on such a thing? The examinees were all a little confused. However, it did not stop them from keeping an eye on the situation over there. After all, the Zergs were famous for being sinister and cunning. They didn't seem like a group that would do useless things. He directly told them that there must be some conspiracy hidden in this. However, as time passed, they finally felt that something was wrong. After the assessment began, shouldn't the Zergs send wave after wave of reinforcements to surround them and give them even more pressure? But now, almost an hour had passed. The bug tribe reinforcements that surrounded them did not show any signs of stopping. Could it be that something unexpected had really happened in the examination hall? Many of the examinees were itching for it. The curiosity hidden in their genes told them that they could go over and take a look. However, the remaining rationality in their minds constantly reminded them that it was fine as long as they could survive this situation. If he was not careful, he might get into trouble. However, the next scene that they witnessed made all the examinees who were paying attention to the abnormality at the edge of the forest involuntarily widen their eyes. At the edge of the dark swarm of beetles in front of the forest, there was a human figure shuttling through. Wherever he passed, it was as if a death whirlwind had been set off. Countless black beetles were sent flying, and dark green stinky mucus splashed everywhere. Sensing his appearance, the surrounding insectoids seemed to have become angry in an instant. Black beetles rushed towards him from all directions, as if they wanted to trap the figure in the fallen forest, unwilling to let him return to the treetops. However, their efforts were clearly in vain. That was because after the figure landed on the ground and killed more than a dozen black beetles, he easily broke free from their encirclement. Many examinees' minds went blank when they saw this scene. When they finally came back to their senses, they all sucked in a breath of cold air in unison. *CK, don't tell me that so many of them are gathered together just to encircle a single candidate. Who exactly is that guy? He actually dared to engage in a head-on confrontation with so many Zergs. No wonder we haven't seen any Zerg reinforcements. In the end, it's because those Zergs that should have come to support were all attracted by that guy. Crazy, this is crazy. Am I crazy or is this world crazy? When they realized that the strange situation at the edge of the forest seemed to be caused by an examinee, the other examinees could not believe their eyes at first. However, considering the current situation, they had no choice but to believe that what they saw was not an illusion. There was really an examinee fighting with the Black Beetle tribe. Then, the problem came. They still needed to concentrate to deal with the pursuit of hundreds of Zergs. How did that mysterious examinee manage to withstand the attacks of thousands of black beetles so easily? The other examinees were all dumbfounded. For a moment, they could not help but doubt their lives. After killing more than 300 black beetle tribe members, the swarm of insects in the forest that tried to find Li Yueming and tear him into pieces finally wavered. They weren't combat troops, and their combat power was actually only enough to bully this group of students who hadn't really become martial artists. However, the strength of this young man in front of him was really a little too strong. It was not something that their race could compete with at all. Therefore, after a few struggles, the Zerg army that had surrounded Li Yueming began to slowly retreat. Seeing this, Li Yueming could not help but sneer. This group of people was quite smart. They knew that they had to maintain their strength when they saw that things were going to be hopeless. Moreover, although they retreated in a mess, they could still see some order. In this day and age, even such a low-level Zerg had such high intelligence. Li Yueming exclaimed. It was no wonder the Zergs could pose such a strong threat to the universe of order. The production efficiency and evolution speed of this thing were both insane. It was indeed not something that a single civilization could resist. Seeing that the group of bugs wanted to retreat, would Li Yueming agree? Naturally not. He could come and go as he pleased. How could there be such a good thing? However, Li Yueming did not leave the jungle area, nor did he come down from the treetop to chase after him. Instead, he grinned and disappeared at the edge of the jungle area in a few leaps. He rushed deeper into the hibernation chamber area that he had seen earlier. With his concealment techniques, even the black beetles would not be able to sense him after he hid in the forest, let alone the other examinees and the spectators who were hundreds of meters away. Therefore, in the eyes of the others, Li Yueming seemed to have suddenly disappeared, directly vanishing from the face of the earth. Only the examiners and accompanying examiners in the special spectator stands could observe the entire trajectory. At this moment, Liang Run, who was the head examiner, had calmed down. However, his eyes were still filled with eagerness when he looked at Li Yueming. It couldn't be helped. Li Yueming's performance just now was too amazing. Not only did it exceed the expectations of the other exam partners, but it also far exceeded his expectations. Whether it was for the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy or for himself, the appearance of such a super genius was a great blessing. No wonder he was so excited. Seeing Li Yueming suddenly abandon the Zergs who were preparing to retreat and rush deeper into the forest, Liang Run rubbed his eyes and thought for a moment. He couldn't help but laugh. How dare you? You're preparing to wipe out this group of damn bugs. The other examiners had not reacted at first, but now that they heard Liang Run's words, they roughly understood Li Yueming's intentions. The Zerg army at the edge of the forest was still in formation and ready to retreat. The Zerg base camp at the hatching chamber was at its emptiest. Li Yueming suddenly disappeared from the forest at this critical moment and rushed in the direction of the hatching chamber. Without a doubt, he was going for the Black Beetle Queen that had harmed many geniuses. Such a decisive judgment and such decisive execution, even they could only give him a thumbs up. This young man was simply too perfect. He was like a flawless hexagonal warrior, outstanding in all aspects. Who knew how far he could go in the future? Would he be able to become one of the pillars of the entire alliance of law? Of course, it was still too early to see all of this, but it did not stop them from speculating and fantasizing. If nothing unexpected happened, this young man should be the strongest dark horse in this year's Ultimate Martial Arts Academy assessment. Li Yueming's speed was extremely fast. As an experienced warrior, he was very sensitive to the enemy's movements. If it was before and he suddenly went to kill the Black Beetle Queen, the 1,000 black beetles at the edge of the forest would undoubtedly come to support him at an extremely fast speed. At that time, even if he was lucky enough to succeed, it was very likely that he would fall into an awkward situation of being attacked from both sides. However, it was different now. Due to Li Yueming's continuous attacks, the black beetles withdrew their formation and wanted to retreat. This created a very good gap for Li Yueming. After all, the gathered zergs were completely different when they were separated. After the formation was closed, the black bugs had to disperse again to move quickly. However, it would obviously take time for them to split up again. According to Li Yueming's estimation, he would be given at least 3 minutes of free time. Don't underestimate these 3 minutes. In a life and death battle, 3 minutes was enough to change everything. The opportunity was fleeting. Li Yueming had basically revealed all his trump cards to the public. What he needed to do was to show his most invincible posture here. Chapter 819, Could this be cultivated on a small planet? 1. In the examination hall, Li Yueming quickly crossed the forest. His speed was as fast as the wind. The other examinees in the surroundings also noticed his appearance and disappearance. All of them seemed to have seen a ghost. They even repeatedly wiped their eyes to make sure that what they saw was not an illusion. **CK, what had swooshed past just now? It looks like a person? Wang Defa, are you serious? The previous few assessments were clearly very normal. Why are there so many accidents when it's our turn? How ridiculous! This world is simply crazy. At this moment, Li Yueming felt that his body and bones were heating up. His entire body was like a high-speed machine that carried unparalleled energy and rushed towards the direction of the incubation chamber. In the distance, the hatchery area that was specially used to awaken and restrict the zergs appeared in front of Li Yueming. This was usually the area that examinees avoided the most because it was the closest to the Black Beetle Queen. It was very easy for more zergs to block the assessment path. But now, Li Yueming had taken the initiative to come here. Such an arrogant attitude. However, not a single examinee or teacher in the entire examination hall could complain. It couldn't be helped. The strength that Li Yueming had just shown was too strong, far exceeding the limits of what ordinary geniuses could do. If it were any other examinee, they would be courting death by launching a sneak attack on the zerg nest. But if it was Li Yueming, he could only make a group of people sweat for him. Do you think he can kill the Black Beetle Queen? How the **CK do we know about this? However, since he dared to take such a big risk to come to the incubation area, it at least meant that he had a certain degree of confidence. This Black Beetle Queen has been in the examination hall for many years. I don't know how many geniuses have attacked her. I hope Li Yueming doesn't fail miserably. To think that a small planet's genius could do such a thing. It's simply making us, trash from a big planet, feel ashamed. Many examinees sighed. Obviously, he was quite amazed by Li Yueming's performance. Under their gazes, Li Yueming finally stopped moving. Now that he had reached the edge of the jungle, he would step into the incubation area if he walked any further. The only place in the incubation area that could be hidden was the ruins of a collapsed building. If nothing went wrong, the Black Beetle Queen should be hiding in one of the buildings. Li Yueming was not in a hurry to get close. After all, it was easy to alert the Black Beetle Queen if they approached the nest without full confidence. In the end, it might cause the Black Beetle Queen to escape when she saw that the situation was not good. Therefore, he hid in the bushes and carefully observed the position of the Zerg patrol soldiers in the ruins. He tried to determine the exact location of the Black Beetle Queen from the location of their branches and other clues. After spending a minute or two, Li Yueming roughly confirmed that the Black Beetle Queen should be in the abandoned container in the ruins. That was because the black beetles were the most concentrated there. Not only that, but there were also many patrolling sentries in the corners of the surrounding ruins. All kinds of signs indicated that they were protecting their queen. Seeing these details, Li Yueming couldn't help but sigh at the intelligence level of the Zerg. From various perspectives, this group of black beetles should be one of the lowest races among the insect race, but even so, they still possessed intelligence that was not inferior to humans. Not only did he know how to set up formations, but he also knew how to set up patrols in the open and in the dark. One in the light and the other in the dark, guarding the entire nest. If it was someone else who didn't understand the situation, they might really be fooled. However, with Li Yueming's experience, he obviously wouldn't step into such a trap. After carefully observing for a moment to make sure that there was no problem with his judgment, he was shocked. Li Yueming finally moved. He quietly descended from the treetops to the ground. With only a few bushes and some inconspicuous stones, he successfully lurked near the incubation area. The previous operations were not difficult. After all, most of the Zerg soldiers were focused on the ruins and not in the forest. The next step was to test Li Yueming's proficiency in stealth. On the viewing platform, the group of examinees couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat for him. Because they had God's perspective, they could now clearly see that the two Zerg armies behind Li Yueming were already on their way back to the nest. At this moment, Li Yueming was still trapped in the ruins. The guards patrolling outside the Black Beetle Queen's nest were much larger than ordinary black beetles. Be it in terms of strength, speed, or combat experience, they were much stronger than ordinary black beetles. Judging from the combat power that Li Yueming had displayed previously, he estimated that he would only be able to succeed if he got close to the Black Beetle Queen by about 50 to 100 meters. Beyond this extreme distance, every bit of distance was a bit of hope. If he was not careful, he might even be surrounded by the surrounding bug tribe guards and end up dying of exhaustion from being attacked from both sides. Li Yueming avoided the outermost patrol line of the Black Beetle guards with extreme movement. He was about to face the more heavily guarded inner line. Chapter 820, Could this be cultivated on a small planet? 2. The surrounding audience could not help but twitch their eyelids. This second line of defense is basically guarded by black beetles from every angle. There are also hidden sentries behind the open sentries. Could it be that we can only try to kill our way out? Upstairs, we're still more than 150 meters away from the container where the Black Beetle Queen is. I'm afraid we'll be surrounded by the surrounding Black Beetle guards halfway. This is too difficult. Li Yueming shouldn't be in such a hurry. If we wait a little longer, the Black Beetle Queen will send more Zergs. That should be the best time. Previous poster, your thoughts and actions are only suitable for the normal assessment process. The assessment is about to be stirred up by Li Yueming. Sigh. It would be too difficult to barge in like this. The Black Beetle Queen did not leave any chance at all. In the spectator stands, the group of examinees were nervous but also disappointed. After all, if Li Yueming could really kill the Black Beetle Queen, it would be a rare scene that could not be seen for decades. They might even witness a new history and a new legend. However, the defense of the Black Beetle Queen's guards was too tight. There was no chance for Li Yueming to sneak in. This was too unfair. Beneath his feet, Li Yueming had also noticed this. The Black Beetle Queen's defense mechanism was arranged perfectly. Even Li Yueming would not be able to sneak in without using some extra methods. However, just as the other examinees thought that he would retreat, Li Yueming suddenly moved towards the location of a black beetle. He was soon exposed to the sight of the black beetle. This scene stunned all the spectators present. Someone could not help but exclaim, "What are you trying to do by revealing your location? Is Li Yueming really crazy? This is the black beetle nest. Once it is attacked, the Zergs in other areas will quickly come over. I thought that he would use all sorts of methods to deal with it, but I never thought that he would actually rush up directly. Let's not talk about anything else, I'll give this courage a thumbs up first. I wonder if the examiners will initiate an emergency rescue? It would be a pity if such a rare genius died in the assessment." The spectator stand was in a short clamor. The only ones who remained silent were Enlina and the other two. At this moment, when they saw Li Yueming rushing forward without dodging, the three of them felt as if their hearts were being gripped by an invisible hand. They could not even breathe. There was nothing he could do. He was really worried. If Li Yueming could enter the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy with perfect results, then not only himself, but also his fellow countrymen and his mother planet 7 to 20,003 would usher in an unprecedented big turning point. An expert who could roam freely in the universe meant that he had a thigh that could not be any thicker. Even if he could only gain a little bit of light, it was enough to change too many things. However, if Li Yueming failed, it might be fine if it was just a simple failure. After all, with his current points, even if he did not do anything, it was enough to enter the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. There might be a difference, but it would definitely not be too big. Li Yueming could still receive additional training from the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. The only thing that made them nervous was whether Li Yueming could survive the next crisis. After all, this was the nest of the Zergs. It might not take 5 minutes after the location was exposed, and all the surrounding Zergs would realize that they had been stolen and rush back. At that time, it wouldn't be a matter of how many points he scored. It was whether Li Yueming could survive this assessment. Under the gazes of a group of people with different thoughts, Li Yueming, who was in the examination hall, was already moving quickly like a coiled spring. After he was discovered by the patrolling Black Beetle, he arrived in front of it in just a breath's time. He swung his sledgehammer like a cannonball and smashed the Black Beetle's head into pieces. After doing all this, Li Yueming did not stop at all. With a turn of his body, he appeared at the hidden sentry behind the Zerg. He raised his hammer and ended its life with a swing. The Black Beetle Queen's sentry post was almost flawless. The only flaw was that the positions between the open and hidden sentries were too close. If the enemy was fast enough, it was entirely possible to launch an attack before the two Black Beetles sent out a message. In other words, the ultimate secret of stealth was to kill all creatures that saw you. This way, no one would ever see it again. After killing the two Black Beetle guards at an extremely fast speed, Li Yueming's figure did not stop at all. He headed towards the next target position that he had already decided on beforehand. Although he had not been discovered by the patrolling Zergs, he estimated that in less than 30 seconds, the sudden disappearance of the sentry post would be discovered by the other Black Beetles. Thus, this infiltration was undoubtedly an act of survival. Chapter 821, Could this be cultivated on a small planet? _3. It was no exaggeration to say that it was a race against time on the edge of the blade. If there was a slight mistake, all his efforts might go to waste. Li Yueming's speed was extremely fast and his attacks were extremely accurate. Unfortunately, the sledgehammer he had chosen back then had affected his performance. When he was less than 120 meters away from the Bug Tribe Queen's container, his invasion was finally discovered. However, this distance was enough for Li Yueming. He no longer tiptoed, but rushed straight towards the container like a whirlwind. The Black Beetle guards who were responsible for guarding the surroundings were all the most elite Black Beetles. There were 2 or even 3 patterns on the shell. At this moment, seeing how daring Li Yueming was to attack their nest, they all spat out mouthfuls of venom without mercy. As long as they could hit Li Yueming, the strong corrosive properties would melt Li Yueming into a pool of liquid. However, Li Yueming's speed was too fast. Even if he encountered an attack that he could not dodge, he would only gently swing the hammer in his hand. It was as if he had eyes and accurately slapped away the poison that was about to hit him. He did not even frown the entire time. This emotionless machine-like operation stunned the audience. Previously, when they saw Li Yueming killing the Zergs in the forest area, because every attack was repeated, the group of examinees did not feel Li Yueming's exquisite martial arts skills that were like art. Then, at this moment, they had finally witnessed it. Was that the same person? It was clearly a precision machine that had been adjusted to the extreme. As if he had practiced it in advance, every rise and fall, every swing, every turn, and every pause were appropriate. He moved through the poison attacks of the Black Beetle guards with extreme agility. After discovering that long-range attacks were ineffective, the two of them were stunned. A few black beetles with 3 stripes on their bodies actually flew up. This scene not only exceeded the expectations of the other audience members. Even many examiners in the examination hall were shocked and exclaimed, "These are level 3 black beetles, right? They even have the ability to fly. Why didn't you guys clear them out?" The few people who were reprimanded were the staff in charge of the examination hall management. At this moment, when they heard this, their faces looked like they wanted to say something but hesitated. Their gazes turned to the head examiner standing at the front. The main examiner did not make things difficult for them. Instead, he said with a serious expression, "As you all know, the recent battles on the front lines have become more and more difficult, and the requirements for the younger generation have also become higher and higher. Out of responsibility for the front lines in the third universe, and also out of responsibility for the safety of the examinees, it is necessary to increase the difficulty of the assessment." Hearing this, the faces of the few accompanying teachers relaxed a little, but someone still said, "Shouldn't they send a notice? If they adjust the difficulty without saying anything, it will cause complaints." The head examiner smiled and comforted his colleagues, "Don't worry, as long as there are examinees who can overcome all difficulties to reach this stage, it will be difficult for them to die in the examination hall." Upon hearing this, the tense nerves of the few accompanying teachers were completely relieved. Looking at Li Yueming, who was still struggling in the field, some teachers could not help but whisper, "Is this really a young man that a small planet can nurture? What a pervert!" Chapter 822, Assessment ended, highest score in history. 1. In the examination hall, Li Yueming was still trying his best to dash left and right. However, outside the examination hall, the group of students preparing for the exam and the teachers of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy were all sweating for him. Especially after the appearance of the level 3 black beetle, the entire examination hall was in an uproar. Some students exclaimed, "What the hell? In the past assessments, there were only level 2 black beetles, right? Where did this level 3 black beetle that could fly come from? Level 1 normal black beetle, level 2 elite black beetle, level 3 was already the strongest form that a normal black beetle could grow to without any mutation. The appearance of this thing could already be considered an unexpected disaster, right? Where are the teachers of the Ultimate Martial Academy? Why didn't he go and save that young man? I don't know, was the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy playing with the lives of the examinees? Although the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy is famous for being cold-blooded and cruel, this kind of thing isn't necessary. I heard from the staff just now that this seems to be a test that the main examiner deliberately increased the difficulty of the test. Regardless of whether he passes or fails, the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy will not let any accidents happen to his life. Oh? Was this for real? That's more like it. But this Li Yueming is really ridiculous. A genius from a small planet can actually make the main examiner of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy specially increase the difficulty of the assessment for him. A monster of this level is quite rare even in the history of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy, right? In a trance, I saw a rising star. After figuring out what was going on, the group of examinees who were watching could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Then, they couldn't help but feel envious and jealous. It couldn't be helped. Li Yueming's performance was so outstanding that they even had doubts about their talent and strength for a moment. Li Yueming was born on a small planet, so it was impossible for him to receive such a systematic education from a young age. However, the strength he displayed today was still far beyond their imagination. In the incubation area, 5 or 6 level 3 black beetles flapped their wings and flew up. Under normal circumstances, there would not be too many level 3 black beetles in the black beetle nest. It was not because they could not continue to evolve, but because their flying ability would reduce their weight. This was in conflict with their original mission. Therefore, only a small number of black beetles that did not engage in labor and production could evolve into level 3 black beetles. After growing wings, the black beetle's carapace would become harder. At the same time, the wings could greatly improve their slow movement speed. Therefore, they were able to get close to Li Yueming very quickly. As the black beetles approached, puffs of stinky dark green mucus sprayed everywhere. Li Yueming's dodging space was further compressed, so that Li Yueming could only dodge the omnipresent attacks from extremely dangerous angles. This sudden accident had undoubtedly disrupted Li Yueming's initial plan. Although a few level 3 black beetles flying in the air could not catch up with his speed, its accurate and fast slime was always able to stop Li Yueming from advancing forward. At this moment, Li Yueming could already see the nest of the black beetle queen not far away. However, the number of black beetle guards who had discovered the abnormality and rushed over had also increased by several times. It seemed that if he didn't show his true abilities today, he really wouldn't be able to complete this assessment. It had to be said that to be able to force Li Yueming to this extent, as a top martial arts school that was slightly famous in the entire Third Cosmos, the assessment of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy was still very valuable. But that was all. Under the siege of a group of black beetles, Li Yueming, who was still charging forward, suddenly stopped. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He spent countless reincarnation points and merged many top martial arts techniques. The star and moon art, which was almost complete, began to circulate. Li Yueming's entire body was covered in mist, and even his skin turned red. Before the venom of the surrounding black beetles could get close to Li Yueming's body, they were evaporated by the invisible air wave. At this scene, all the examinees candidates in the spectator area could not help but gasp. The main examiner of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy, who was on the special viewing platform, looked at Li Yueming at his feet and exclaimed as if he had seen a ghost, "Martial Arts Cultivation Method, this kid only learned the third cultivation method for personal magnificent power warriors and actually comprehended martial arts cultivation method?" Moreover, looking at the energy level, this cultivation technique was quite top-notch. Heavenly talent, simply heavenly talent. Towards the end, the head examiner's voice was trembling. What was a genius? At the age of 18, he had comprehended a complete top-notch martial arts technique from the third cultivation method for personal magnificent power warriors. Even in the entire third universe, he was definitely worthy of being called a top-notch genius. Seeing that the head examiner's face was flushed red from excitement, many of the accompanying teachers behind him looked at Li Yueming with shining eyes. A white-haired, skinny teacher said, "I want this kid. No one is allowed to snatch him from me." Chapter 823, Assessment ended, highest score in history. 2. As soon as he said this, the entire special spectator area immediately exploded. "You old thing, you're already more than 8,000 years old this year. Your old bones definitely can't match the brainwaves of young people. This student still has to follow me to show his strongest form. Who are you calling old bones? Do you want to spar? Both of you, be quiet. Our class happens to have a few vacancies. This student has to go to our class." The group of teachers glared at each other and almost started fighting. In the end, the head examiner roared angrily with a livid face. Only then did the group of people quieten down. However, their eyes were still filled with fervor when they looked at Li Yueming. The exam was still in progress. However, the result had already come to an end when Li Yueming used the star-moon art. Many of the black beetles that had surrounded them were instantly blown into pieces by Li Yueming's sledgehammer. The dark green liquid was scattered all over the ground as if it was free. The few level 3 black beetles became Li Yueming's main target. After a few hits, the shell that they were so proud of seemed to be non-existent. In an instant, it was dented and fell to the ground with a crack. It turned into a pool of dark green liquid that was no different from the other black beetles. At this moment, Li Yueming was like a god of death who had descended to the mortal world. He activated his peerless skill in the nest of the black beetles. He carried a hammer and continued to move forward firmly and stubbornly under the encirclement of many black beetles. The examinees who were also taking the test quickly discovered in shock that the black beetles chasing behind them suddenly retreated as if they had gone crazy. There were a total of 50 examinees in the entire examination hall. Now, other than Li Yueming, who was fighting a bloody battle, the other 49 had lost their opponents. This unfamiliar feeling made many examinees feel very uncomfortable for a moment. So what the hell happened? Why was it so strange? After looking around blankly and confirming that it really wasn't a trap, the group of examinees finally mustered up their courage and headed in the direction where the Zergs had retreated. Intuition told them that the reason why the black beetles were retreating in such a hurry was that something was wrong with the nest, and it was very likely to be a very big problem. Perhaps they could take this opportunity to take advantage of it. However, when they arrived at the border between the hatchery district and the jungle area, they saw an unforgettable scene. On the ground that was covered in ruins and debris, nearly 10,000 black beetles gathered. The entire ground was covered in black torrents, and in the middle of the black torrents, a young man holding a giant hammer was like a god of death walking in the human world, crazily killing. One after another, the black beetles were trampled to death like ants in front of him. In the waste gas container not far in front of the young man, a giant black beetle with an exquisite shell and a few gorgeous antennae was peeking out, watching everything with fear. If he was not mistaken, it should be the black beetle queen. F***ck. Someone had broken into the black beetle nest? Moreover, he was able to do it while being surrounded by so many black beetles? Were they insane, or was the world insane? Was he hallucinating? When the group of examinees saw this scene, they were all dumbfounded. He froze on the spot and did not know how to face it. He finally came back to his senses. While he kept inhaling cold air, he looked at the group of furious black beetles not far away. His heart could not help but become lively. He began to hunt down the lone beetles in 2s and 3s. After all, no matter how strong the big boss was, it had nothing to do with them. If they couldn't kill 100 black beetles, they wouldn't even be able to pass the test. Now that the boss had attracted the attention of most of the black beetles, they could take advantage of the opportunity to clear out some of the lone black beetles. Otherwise, when the black beetles in the entire area were all killed by the boss, they might not even have a place to cry. Li Yueming had already reached the exhaust container where the black beetle queen was. However, he was not in a hurry to rush in and deal with this cunning bug. Instead, he was prepared to block the entrance and continue to farm points. After all, Li Yueming had revealed all kinds of trump cards that were already scary enough. In any case, he would not be able to escape the result of being questioned in the end. He did not mind being even more scary and getting the highest score in history. Or Loki pretending to be a pig. Or a tiger roaring in the forest. It would be stupid if he couldn't achieve high or low. Li Yueming didn't know how many black beetles he had killed. He didn't wake up from the thrill of killing until the giant hammer in his hand was about to be smashed flat and the examination hall was about to end when the whistle sounded. He turned around and smashed his hammer on the abandoned container behind him. Following a loud bang, the Zerg Queen, who was originally hiding in the middle of the hammer, was instantly turned into a pool of liquid by the terrifying vibration brought by the hammer. The Queen's mission in the race was to be responsible for production. They did not have any combat strength. Therefore, as long as Li Yueming could break through the defense line, it would be easy for him to kill it. After killing the Black Beetle Queen, all the black bugs in the arena were stunned for a while. This was because a part of their neural network was connected to their race. Now that the Queen of Black Beetles was dead, a large part of their network was empty, so they immediately stopped their fierce attacks and looked around blankly. Li Yueming's body was already overheated, and his stamina had dropped drastically. He had already gotten enough points. As such, he wasn't very interested in this motley crew. Instead, it benefited the other examinees who were drinking soup behind him. They had a good time at the last moment of the exam. When the second whistle sounded, this soul-stirring assessment finally came to an end. It was obvious that there was no need to deliberately exaggerate or publicize what Li Yueming had done in the examination hall today. In a very short period of time, the news would spread to the entire Emperor Sun Star area. It might even cause quite a stir in the third universe. Of course, Li Yueming wasn't too clear about this. After the exam ended, like the other examinees, the first thing he did was to look up at the assessment points on the display screen not far away. Assessment result list. First place, Lin Xiu. 27,741 credits, ranked first on the overall leaderboard. Second place, Ji's He Tao. 1,540 credits, ranked fifth on the overall rankings. Third place. One by one, the names of the examinees appeared. The most dazzling one was undoubtedly Li Yueming. More than 27,000 points raised the highest limit of the entire Ultimate Martial Arts Academy assessment by more than 10,000 points. Not to mention anything else, just this achievement alone was enough for Li Yueming to become a legend that other examinees who participated in the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy's assessment in the future could not reach. As for the group of examinees behind Li Yueming, although they were not even considered fireflies under Li Yueming's bright moon, they could only be considered as insignificant little sparks. Relying on Li Yueming attracting the attention at the front, they also picked up a lot of leftovers at the back. The second place even directly became the fifth place among all the examinees in this examination. It was considered to be extremely lucky. Many young geniuses in the exam area who had yet to start the exam were so envious that their eyes turned red. They wished that they were in the same exam hall as Li Yueming just now, so that they could easily pass the exam. After the assessment ended, all the examinees were teleported out of the examination hall. Under normal circumstances, the examinees would be sent to the same place after the exam and wait for the rest of the process. However, what appeared in front of Li Yueming was a sealed space without any other examinees. This space was rather secretive and filled with a metallic texture. If nothing unexpected happened, it should be that his actions in the examination hall had attracted special attention. At the moment, the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy no longer treated him as an ordinary genius. He just didn't know what would be waiting for him next. Li Yueming couldn't help but look forward to it. Chapter 824, Supreme Martial Artist, the strongest in Emperor Sun Galaxy. 1. In the metal space, Li Yueming was a little nervous. Now that his talent had been displayed, he did not know if he had gone too far. The only thing he was worried about now was that he had gone overboard during the assessment just now and caused an accident. Fortunately, his thoughts were unnecessary. This universe was too big, so big that ordinary humans could not even imagine it. The number of creatures living in it was as many as the number of sand grains. In front of such a huge unit of measurement, there was no absolute genius. Li Yueming's current talent might attract a lot of attention in the Emperor Sun Star area and even the entire third universe, but what could it be outside of the third universe? There would always be someone better than him. No matter how talented Li Yueming was, it was far from arousing suspicion and taboo. Unless he revealed his perfect geno body, it might cause some trouble. Therefore, Li Yueming waited for less than 2 minutes before the main examiner brought a few examiners into the metal space. Looking at the young man in front of him who was still calm and composed, the head examiner nodded with some praise and said, "The strength that you displayed just now was not bad. It can be said that you have refreshed our inherent impression of the disciples of the small planets." Hearing his praise, Li Yueming didn't get carried away. He smiled humbly and said, "Thank you for your praise, head examiner. So, am I considered to have passed the test?" "Of course. Not only have you passed the assessment, but you will also enjoy the top resources of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy. I can't guarantee anything else, but I can guarantee that everything you use in the Ultimate Martial Academy will be the best." After making sure that the head examiner's voice and posture were normal, Li Yueming heaved a sigh of relief and replied, "In that case, that's great. I hope I can make more contributions to the Ultimate Martial Academy." After sizing up Li Yueming, the head examiner corrected him with a serious expression and said, "You don't need to make any contributions to the Ultimate Martial Academy, because it's not the Ultimate Martial Academy that's nurturing you. It's the entire Third Universe's tax collectors. When you join the Ultimate Martial Academy and enjoy the top resources, don't forget all the people in the Third Universe." Hearing these words, Li Yueming was startled. He immediately reacted and nodded, "It's only natural that you don't forget the people who dug the well when you drink water." The examiner nodded his head. He was already very satisfied with Li Yueming's performance. Now that he had personally met Li Yueming, he was even more satisfied. The young man in front of him was neither arrogant nor impatient. He looked very humble and polite. At a glance, it was obvious that he was not the kind of person who was arrogant and had no fear. This world did not lack geniuses, nor did it lack young people who could shock the world. However, a young genius like Li Yueming who could still keep his heart and was neither arrogant nor impatient was quite rare. Only such young people were truly worthy of investing resources to nurture. The two of them had a simple contact and eliminated the initial unfamiliar estrangement. The head examiner asked the real question he had come here for. "How did you learn the martial arts technique that you used just now?" Li Yueming was naturally prepared for this, so after blinking a few times, he quickly replied without blushing, "Isn't there a path of learning related to martial arts techniques in the third cultivation plan for personal mighty power adept? I studied it for a few years, and then concluded that this technique is more suitable for me." Hearing Li Yueming's answer, even though he was mentally prepared, the head examiner still felt his teeth ache. As a level 14 star field warrior, he was very confident. He naturally had his own martial arts techniques that he was good at. However, when he comprehended this set of martial arts cultivation method, he was already close to 1,000 years old. Just this alone could be considered one of the best among the martial artists of his generation back then. However, the student in front of him was only 18 years old. In the long path of martial arts, he could only be considered a child. However, he had already comprehended his own martial arts cultivation method in the third cultivation plan. Moreover, this cultivation technique was so powerful. It was really infuriating to compare people. He panted a few times. After finally calming down, the head examiner smiled and said, "It seems that you are really a genius born for martial arts. May I take the liberty to ask the name of the cultivation method you comprehended?" Li Yueming thought for a moment and replied, "The star moon art is not presentable." "How could this not be presentable? Even if it's not presentable now, it will be continuously improved by you in the future and become presentable." The head examiner was roaring in his heart, but there was not much expression on his face. He forced a smile and said, "It's good for young people to keep a low profile, but there's no need to be too humble. A genius is a genius, an upright genius." Speaking of this, he basically had no more doubts. There should be companions and friends waiting for your triumphant return outside, right? You can go back first. I'll send someone to follow and protect you. Don't leave the Imperial Sun Star during this period of time. We'll meet again after the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy's assessment officially ends. After saying that, the main examiner and the few exam partners disappeared into the metal space. Chapter 825, Supreme Martial Artist, the strongest in Emperor Sun Galaxy. 2. Li Yueming felt his vision blur, and soon found himself back in the waiting hall. At this moment, the other examinees who had finished their assessment had already left. Only Enlina, Lu Dali, and the others were waiting anxiously in the waiting hall. Seeing him appear, the three of them were obviously relieved. Fan Li ran over and said with a charming expression, Big Brother Li, you're my brother from now on. Don't forget to take care of me when you're rich. I'll take you to the Third Universe Center for a foot massage." Li Yueming teased. "I'll see if the massage service at the center is more special." Originally, he had only said it casually, but he didn't expect Fan Li to actually listen. He tilted his head and fantasized for a while before saying seriously, "Then let's make a deal. I want the service of technician number 83. You're really thinking about it?" Li Yueming couldn't help but laugh. The two of them joked a little, and the atmosphere became much livelier. Lina examined Li Yueming from head to toe before clicking her tongue in wonder. "Not bad, kid. I didn't know you were so powerful. No wonder Evelyn dared to send you here this year." Li Yueming smiled. "Isn't that so? We have to make Planet 7 to 20,003 a better planet." Lina couldn't help but chuckle upon hearing this. "How? Is this a proper name? It's clearly to make our mother planet a big hit in the entire Emperor Yang star field and even the third universe." The four of them laughed. They were obviously in a good mood. When Li Yueming had insisted on participating in the first round of the assessment, Lin had been furious. After all, she had watched as an outstanding junior from the same mother planet embarked on a path of no return, and she had been utterly disappointed. However, she never expected Li Yueming to give her such a big surprise. From another perspective, it could even be considered a shock. If he hadn't been mentally prepared just now. At this moment, she might not have completely recovered from her shock and did not know how to face Li Yueming. Fortunately, Li Yueming didn't dwell on what happened before, so she didn't feel too embarrassed. After chatting for a while in the exam hall, the four of them prepared to leave. However, when they walked out of the gate of the Ultimate Martial Arts Academy, they realized that a group of reporters from the Imperial Sun planet had gathered outside. Good heavens, this group of people really had the noses of dogs. The four of them had just left. A group of reporters rushed forward. "May I ask who is Mr. Li Yueming?" someone asked. "We are from the Imperial Sun military radio station. Can we have a few minutes of your time for an interview?" Before Li Yueming could reply, another group of reporters interrupted. "Hello, Mr. Li Yueming. We are the resident reporters of the Third Cosmos. We would like to open an exclusive column for you. We hope to ask you some questions about the assessment and cultivation. Under normal circumstances, Li Yueming might be willing to answer a few questions. But now, a large group of reporters had gathered around, and the microphone was almost stuffed into Li Yueming's mouth. They were still introducing themselves, and the names of the TV stations behind them were getting louder and louder. They were all famous existences in the Emperor Sun starfield and even the entire third universe. After a few actions, Li Yueming was instantly indifferent. He rejected expressionlessly, "I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well right now. I can't accept the interview." With that, he turned around and prepared to leave. This action didn't scare the others, but it did scare Lina. After all, she had been in the Imperial Sun star field for many years, and she knew the power behind these TV stations. No matter which one of them was placed in normal times, even she could only look up to them. Now that Li Yueming had rejected so many of them, he was afraid that he had offended a reinforced company. However, before she could whisper a reminder, she heard a deep voice from behind her. "Where did so many flies come from? Get lost." As soon as he said this, even Li Yueming was shocked, let alone Lina. It was normal for Li Yueming to refuse the interview. That voice just now was clearly offending someone. There were at least dozens of reporters present. After hearing that they had been described as flies, several of their faces darkened on the spot. However, when they saw who said this, they immediately shut their mouths as if someone had pressed the pause button. After a short silence, they came back to their senses and scattered with their tails between their legs in fear. Li Yueming and the others also turned their heads to look behind them. A middle-aged man who looked to be in his 30s with a 2-inch-long scar on his face walked over and patted Li Yueming's shoulder. "Young man, I saw your performance just now. Do your best in the future, I have high hopes for you." The man gave Li Yueming a thumbs up and continued, if you encounter any problems that you can't solve, you can come to the governor's office of the Military Council of Imperial Sun to find me. I'll help you settle them. Hearing this, Li Yueming, Fan Li, and the others didn't react. However, Anlina couldn't help but tremble as she looked at the domineering figure in front of her. You Commander Wu. He heard her exclamation. The man addressed as Commander Wu raised his eyebrows in surprise. Oh! What a beautiful little girl, looking at your attire, are you from the Secret Service? He was sure that he had addressed her correctly and that she was indeed the descendant of Commander Wu. Anlina immediately tensed up visibly. He stood where he was and saluted, saying respectfully, Anlina, the leader of the high-level special agent team in the main office of Planet Dying, greets you. May Commander Wu's martial arts be eternal. The man was shocked by her extremely solemn posture and hurriedly waved his hand. This is not a battlefield, and we are not on duty. Young lady, don't be so serious. However, even though he said so, Anlina's entire body was clearly still stiff, and she couldn't relax at all. Fortunately, the man did not care about these details. He said happily, it's a blessing for the martial arts and order alliance to have you young people. I still have some things to do, so I'll be leaving first. After saying that, the man walked away. He waved at them and disappeared. It came suddenly and left even more suddenly. As a result, Li Yueming, Fan Li, and the others were still dumbfounded. There was no doubt that one sentence was enough to scare the reporters away with their tails between their legs. This man's background was definitely not ordinary, but neither Li Yueming nor Fan Li knew what his background was. After the man completely disappeared, they then turned to Anlina and asked curiously, Miss Anlina, who is this Commander Wu? Could he be the Commander-in-Chief of the Military Committee of the Imperial Sun Galaxy? He heard a few questions. Anlina finally came back to her senses, but her eyes were still fixed on the direction Commander Wu had disappeared in before she reluctantly retracted her gaze. Haven't you already guessed it? Why are you still asking me why I'm doing a damn? Hearing her answer, suddenly, the three of them, including Li Yueming, fell silent as if they had been cast a magical silence spell. The Supreme Commander of the Imperial Sun Military Committee was also the honorary principal of the Ultimate Martial School, and he was the only universe-level Supreme Warrior in the entire Imperial Sun star field. In other words, the person who had just appeared in front of them. Was he a martial Deo Supreme who could dominate the universe? Thinking of this, not to mention Fan Li and Lu Dali, even Li Yueming felt cold sweat all over his body. One had to know that he had used all sorts of methods to investigate the other party just now, but no matter how he investigated, the other party was like an ordinary person without anything special. He could not even feel a hint of killing intent. But now, Anlina was telling him that he was the most powerful being in the entire Imperial Sun system. This conclusion was undoubtedly terrifying.